Hello, hello, hello.
Hi.
Hey.
I think it's working. Let's see.
Hell yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear the
Yes.
panelists?
Hi. Can people hear us?
Thumbs up.
Oh.
If so, chat. Panelists, I'm not hearing you, which is
Oh no.
typical.
That's not ideal.
You can hear me. Can you hear the panelists? Panelists, say hello.
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 Fierce's shirt is iconic.
I
You
think.
can hear everyone. I can't, but that's okay. I'll fix it. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable reason why I'm not hearing it.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. Okay, hang on. I was so
Everything's
excited that we were gonna have no audio issues. You know, that's just how it is.
Jinxed, clearly.
Jinxed it, yeah.
It was such
Absolutely.
an easy
It
one.
wouldn't have been a stream with no
It was
issue.
such an easy one. I had you muted.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Lilith Fox, your resident ambassador that always starts with an audio issue. It is so good to be here. Today, we are having a panel on indie games, gaming communities, queer representation in games. And it is my last panel on this channel for the foreseeable future. And it is bittersweet and exciting. And I am joined by some of the most incredible people, and I'm so excited to introduce them to you. I am queer and non-binary. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm just honestly really, really excited to talk to you about one of my favorite things today, which is games and gaming communities, specifically indie games. So without further ado, I'd love if my wonderful panelists could introduce themselves to all of you, because I know you're all going to love them.
Okay, I guess I will start. So, hi everyone. For those who don't know, my name is Fierce. I use they, them pronouns. I am Latina. I'm originally from Mexico, but now live in the US. You might know me on Twitch as someone who streams a bunch of different indie games, usually games that fall into the wholesome category, but I'm kind of trying to branch myself out more with kind of tougher games like Celeste and Tunic, which I'll definitely be talking about Celeste today. No, it's such an honor being here. I think like games can really bring so much to so many marginalized communities, and specifically, the LGBTQ plus community. So very, very excited for today's panel.
So, I'm Yared. I known online as Manta Ray. Formerly a Mixer streamer and now occasionally a Twitch streamer. But for the past 2 years, I've been a community manager at Whitethorn Games, and I love it. We have a focus on approachable, accessible, and inclusive games, and that's kind of what we're talking about today. So I am very happy to be here. I don't know. We'll get into the types of games that I like in a bit, I'm sure.
Awesome. That's just me then. Yep, I'm Alex. I'm a UK video game community. Good start. A really strong start there. Video game community manager. Currently working at Player2PR with some really wonderful people. My kind of focus is on sort of cozy indie games, but I do also branch out into sort of RPGs and pixel art stuff, and just. Yeah, I don't stream. I wish I did. I obviously could. I know that's how it works, but
one day.
one day.
It always starts just someone.
It's only me stopping me, nothing else.
Oh, I felt that.
But otherwise, that's me.
Alex, it's been a little while since I've seen your shining face, and I just gotta say, your hair looks amazing. I love this style. You've got me. I'm trying to grow out my hair, and I'm like, maybe I should cut it again.
I cut it back in January, and I'm just like, I was so scared to do it, and I was like, you know what? No regrets. No regrets.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm so over the moon excited to be talking to each and every one of you. When I decided that I wanted to do a panel on indie games in particular, but also just games and the communities that surround them, I knew immediately that I wanted to have my friend Fierce join. And I feel the need to say this because I know that Fierce has been like, why am I on this panel? Like with these wonderful community managers. And I just feel like you do not need to be professionally working in community management to be managing communities around games. And I was definitely inspired by Fierce to like start really being into indie games and talking about them and like making that a major focus. So I just wanted to call that out because just in case there was any imposter syndrome around there, I felt the need to make sure chat knew that.
Oh my goodness, I'm like trying so hard to not cry. Thank you so much for those words.
But I'm just honestly excited to be talking to all of you. Whitethorn Games is I'm such a fan queer. Is there a better word for that? The fangirl always comes out and I'm like, I'm not even a girly, so I
don't know. I haven't heard a.
We're gonna make it
Gender
fan
neutral.
queer. I'm a fan queer for Whitethorn Games. And Alex, you know I'm obsessed with all the games that you're handling. I'm like
Thank you.
wildly obsessed. So excited to talk about some of those, and also to just let chat get to know you wonderful humans today. I feel that statement, fan queer. We're gonna make it a thing.
Get it trending.
It'll be trending after today. I thought we would talk first something very simple, maybe, and just sort of get a sense from everybody about like when or how you got into gaming as a hobby. If I'm assuming you do game as a hobby, that is maybe a major assumption, but I would think that probably you do. And what was it that drew you to gaming? And anybody can go. You know, please feel free to talk over each other. I'll talk over you. That's what I do.
Oh my god. I do have actually a funny story on that, which I think kind of talks about, the unfortunate heteronormative society that we might still live, especially more in some places. But I remember when I was really young, I was kind of mostly grew up with my, women friends. And I did always enjoy time with them, but I always kind of wanted to try other stuff. So I remember when being over at their place with all of my, women friends, we would do makeup or other stuff that nowadays I'm not as into. But then I would sometimes see their brothers, because two of them had brothers, playing video games. So sometimes I'd be like, hey, I kind of want to take a break. And I would just hang out with the two brothers of my friends and just play video games. And I feel like that's how I started into gaming, actually.
I love that. I have a similar one. My brother was very into video games and I was actively discouraged from playing them. I was told that it's something that boys do. My upbringing was very weirdly gendered. And I used to sneak to play the games. And it wasn't until I was able to buy my first PlayStation. I was babysitting and working at a pizza place. And I was I made enough money to get a PlayStation and I played Final Fantasy. And I think this might have had something to do with me realizing that I was a lesbian. I was very, very into the women in that game. I wanted to be them, but that was my first real, this is my game that I got lost into kind of moment. But before that, Fierce, I was very much like you. I was stealing the game from the boys in my life.
Exactly.
That's the same with me as well. That was my story. I have an older brother, and he was gifted a PlayStation, I think, because he's a boy. That's what gift is given to a boy. And I would just watch him play my own games. I bought Bratz because that was the game for me. And then eventually would be like, actually, I want to play that game. I want to play Far Cry 3. What's that about? That looks interesting. Or I want to play Call of Duty, actually, because that looks like a big, fun, shooty, bang bang game. I don't care about rats. I want to do that. And then later in life, I was able to buy myself a PlayStation, and I started just like realizing, oh, yep, no, this is something I really do enjoy and have always enjoyed, and just will keep doing it until I die.
Yeah.
So, not to be the only different story here, but
Please.
gaming was never really something that I was ostracized for. I've kind of always belonged, as long as I can remember, to the gaming community. When I was a little kid, some of my earliest memories are playing Mario 64 with my siblings, and for as long as I can remember, I have loved playing video games.
I love that for you, though.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember? I know maybe this for a lot of us is going way back, but do you remember what it was about games that kind of drew you in? Like I said the women, but I was a kid, so I mean, it was definitely that a little bit. But I think for me, it was the worlds. I played a lot of like open world exploration RPG games. I was a big reader. And finding that games had that same escape was kind of a surprise to me, because my brother was encouraged to play games but was not good at them and was very casual. So he just played a lot of like platformers. Like he was not like very into them. So when I realized that there were these stories being told and these worlds that I could escape into, I feel like that was what made me really get into games. So yeah, I mean, that's me, but what about all of you?
I am definitely the same. The sort of two games that I always go to as the ones that I remember were Far Cry 3, weirdly enough, from when we had I think we got an Xbox when I was a kid, and also Horizon Zero Dawn, which was the first game I played that I bought myself on my PlayStation that I bought myself. So like there was a huge lull of time where I sort of stopped playing video games for some reason. Like I can't remember why. But for both of them, it was that sort of sense of story in the open worlds that I really enjoyed. And the way that, I don't know, I'd always loved TV as well, and films. And the way that you can create a film and like become way more, not more invested in a story, but you become so intrinsically a part of it when you are treading the steps of a character. And I just thought that was one of the most interesting things. And I was like, I just love being able to step into these shoes and do things that maybe I wouldn't normally do in real life or would never be able to do in real life. Like, I don't know, becoming someone who can climb giant tall neck giraffe mechanical creatures, or like explore a fantasy world and cast spells. Like that was really like freeing for me.
Yeah. I love that.
No, definitely. I think also for me that kind of like level of immersion that you can like experience in games, which I mean in some movies and other media you can still get to that level, but just the fact that you're kind of playing as a character, I think is just a much stronger immersion. But I think also for me the autonomy, which is kind of related to what you were also saying, right? Like even in games that weren't like story-driven games, I think one of the first games I would play is Mario Kart, and so much of my community gives me a hard time because I am very good at it. I would play hours when I was a little kid, but yeah, just you have a character that you can control, and even things like drive a car that you wouldn't do that as a kid would be like interesting to me. So I completely agree with you, Alex, as well.
I think the biggest draw for me for playing video games is the connectivity to other people and the communities that build around it. Like I said, I grew up playing video games with my siblings, and if a challenge was too hard, I would pass the controller to my older brother and he would help me get through that. And when I eventually got into like competitive gaming and online games and making those friend groups and the challenges that come with that as well, but it's an interesting ride seeing how it brings people together or tears people apart, but
Sometimes both in the same day.
Sometimes it's the same moment is both.
I love that. And I love that yours is Horizon Zero Dawn, Alex. What a story to have as like such a pivotal game for you. I love that.
Yeah.
So we kind of touched on this in this question, but I did want to leave space for it in case there was any additional ones. Are there any games that you can think of, indie or otherwise, that have had a real impact on you, and that you want to talk about today?
There are a handful, I would say, that have had the largest impact on me as a person, but probably number one would be Outer Wilds. And I don't want to get too deep into talking about what the game is about because it is something you can only experience once, and the discovery is the point of the journey. But it's so beautiful and emotional and full of wonder and exploration, and it just destroyed me. I highly recommend it. Go play it. I can't say anything else about it though.
I love it. I love how being destroyed is sometimes something that we are all looking for.
No, definitely. Because I think for me, like the game that has truly made the most impact is Gris, Gris. You can, have, if it's a game that has made impact, I most likely have a plushie of it. That's how I have to tell. But like when I first played it, that was like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, back when I didn't go through any grief or any like big, struggle emotionally. And that first time that I played it, it kind of really let me understand what it is to feel something so personal and deep as grief. It's so much about just you exploring this world that looks like a canvas full of like colors and lack of colors at times, as well as just the music is so impactful. And I don't know, it's a beautiful experience on its own. But then I revisit it after going through a really, really difficult grief. And, I think sometimes games can help you as a way to, as an escapism at times, but in other cases, it can really help you as a way to connect with your emotions. And I think like Gris is one of those games that it has been the one medium that has helped me the most connect with my grief and has helped me like express grief in a way that I didn't know I could express it. Like I like ugly cried for like the entire playthrough, just like the music and everything was in full sync with how I was feeling my grief. And it's also just a great reminder, right, that again, just repeating what I said, but I think it's very important. Like in some cases games can be an escapism, and that's also good on its own, but in other times, again, it can just be that way to help you experience what you're currently experiencing in a more personal level. So yeah, Gris, and it's one of those games that I don't know if I can ever play just because of how much impact it had on me. But it's a game I just recommend to everyone.
I had such a similar experience with that game, Fierce. But go ahead, Alex.
Well, I was just going to say, I shamefully haven't played either of these games. They're the ones that I've had on my list for forever, and I'm like, yeah, I'll get to them one day. Like, they look great. Like, Gris has been on my list forever. Out Wilds forever. I'm just like, yeah, we'll get there at some point.
I fully expect to leave today's stream with a giant list of games to play. So
Okay.
I'm about to open up a notepad right now.
I have my notebook.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not just for the chat, like us too. I'm leaving with a list.
I have two. One of them is not a game like no one's gonna have heard of. The first of all is because I do like a lot of quite aggressive games isn't the right word for it, but kind of AAA games that have story elements, but also a lot of big fighty things, like The Last of Us Part 2. And that story is like, it is so queer without that being relevant, really. Like, of course, it's a huge part of Ellie, the main character's character, and obviously the side characters with the romance in it with Dina and all that stuff. But the fact is, it's not relevant to the story. It's not the biggest part of it. It's not like some secret that has to be kept. It's just there. And for me to have that was just so cool to see, and just like that had an impact on me, just in sense of just like, cool, this just exists, and this is like a AAA game that had so much controversy because of so many different things, but that wasn't it really, except for horrible people who no one cares about.
Opinion irrelevant.
Yeah. The other game, however, is Abzu, and you may have heard me talk about this before, Liz, but that game, it isn't even really about anything, but the way it implements mindfulness as a mechanic, I just found so interesting. It was like one of the first things I'd ever come across. Well, it was one of the first introductions to mindfulness I had, and I didn't know huge amounts of it. And for a video game to be like, hey, you know what, you can just like sit here and breathe and just take in your surroundings just for a minute, and like calm down, and then just continue on. Like, I was like, that's great. I feel so much better now. And for me, the way that the character you play slowly learns more about themselves, I think offers a lot of room for interpretations, and you can kind of throw what you want onto that character. And I think there's a lot to be said for how meditative and how peaceful and how beautiful the music is when that journey is just like, who are you? And you don't even have to have the answer at the end. You can just go on this path and like learn more about yourself, and that's that. And I always come back to that game just because I think it's so rich in every sense of the word.
I love that. I think so. Absolutely, one of the games that had an impact on me was Grease, and I think it was like you, Fierce. It was like it met me at the time that I needed it. And it was funny because I was actually just like on my Switch, and I had my Switch because I wanted to play Breath of the Wild, and I was like, what else is on here? And so this very much was my like random selection, and it was like my real introduction to indie games, like as a category. Like, I'm sure I had played others, but I had never really like thought of them like as a thing. Like, it was my introduction to like looking at them as a category, and like in particular games that are more like soothing in content. And so I started like looking for what else was on the Nintendo Switch. And then all of a sudden I had this, like whole list of games to check out. And, looking online for games that were similar. And it was very much a entryway for me, that game. But Fierce already very eloquently explained why you should all play that game. I think
I didn't know that about you, Lilith. I love that.
Yeah, no, it was huge for me at the time. I think the other game that I have to mention that had an impact on me was Animal Crossing New Leaf. New Leaf was my introduction to the way that I play games, which, if you're not familiar with like my approach to gaming, I say that I approach gaming with a mindfulness lens. And I was going through a period of, I was dealing with trauma, and I was having bad anxiety, and I had all these therapists being like, try mindfulness. And I was like, I can't, it's confusing. I don't get it. Like, I hate it. And so I started playing New Leaf. And as I was playing it, which I was playing New Leaf for lesbian reasons, like I was with my partner at the beginning, and we had just gotten together, and she was like, we should play New Leaf together, so I wasn't playing it for mindfulness reasons. But I started to like practice mindfulness in the game just because it was this thing that I was signing into every day anyway. And it suddenly like started to click for me in ways that didn't click for me out in the world, because it just felt harder out in the world. And it started to make sense for me. And then I was able to sort of start incorporating some of that into my actual life. So it had a tremendous impact on me. I don't know if they intentionally created a game that would work for mindfulness, but it definitely informed my approach to a lot of games. And now I play everything with this. Like even, you know, I was just when I was live before talking about Genshin Impact, I play Genshin Impact with a mindfulness lens. And it doesn't matter. I would play The Last of Us Part 2 with a mindfulness lens. Like, so, you know, I think Animal Crossing New Leaf was a big one for me. Those two probably are, it's so hard to narrow it down, but I think those two. So what about these days? What are you playing right now? And like, is there anything like a particular genre, a particular game, something that you are kind of hooked on? I did play Mindful Elden Ring. Cozy and Mindful Elden Ring. We did it on stream. It was fun.
I love that.
Anything is a mindful game if you put your mind to it.
It's
like,
true.
Just how it works.
Mindful GTA one.
Seeing the chat, yeah, I love that.
Just do mindful GTA and just like go do your groceries. I don't know.
Oh, please.
There's a ton of RP communities in GTA.
I love it.
Oh. But yes, currently I am playing what am I playing? Assassin's Creed Odyssey. That's my I like having an action adventure game in one place and then a kind of more indie mindful game on the other, because it scratches the right parts of my brain. So Assassin's Creed Odyssey is on that side, and I'm also playing Old Man's Journey, if anyone's played that. Really, really sweet puzzle game where you just play as an old man who's going on a journey, and it's got beautiful artwork, and the way the mechanics work is it looks like a 2D landscape with different like mountains and stuff, but you can raise the heights of different parts of the landscape to make them connect, so you can hop along and along until the old man is far away in the distance and can move on to the next part of his journey. And there's a story that comes about just through very subtle things, and it's really, really beautiful. I definitely recommend it. It's quite cheap if that's something people worry about, and it's just a very relaxing experience I've found so far.
Awesome. So would you say that you do like you like to have a balance between like an action, like bigger open world game, and then something more like puzzly, chill on the side? Is that what you kind of do?
Yeah, like I'm also playing Sims 4. I got very into that recently.
Really?
Yeah, I've never been hugely into it, but then my TikTok decided, hey, Alex, do you want to be on Sims 4 creation talk? And I was like, why not? And the things people build,
Amazing.
I'm just like, how do they do this? And there's so many bugs and glitches and codes, and I'm just like really into that at the moment. Sorry. But yeah, so I like, because sometimes if I'm feeling maybe overwhelmed or a little bit stressed, or if I just want an action adventure game, those tend to be quite good. But yeah, I like having both at the same time because they can work for me in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Fierce. I know you were talking. Sorry.
Oh no, good. Yeah, because I think I'm the same way. Although before I forget, I think Old Man's Journey, I usually see it in many itch.io bundles. I know I have it as like a game to play because I got it in a bundle. So if you're considering on buying it, see if you have it already. Because sometimes, if you get the game on itch, you forget that you have those games. So
I do that.
Need to like remind myself, wait, let me check if I already have it on itch.io. So that was the thing I wanted to mention, so that people could potentially play it already if they have it. But no, actually, I'm very similar to you, Alex. So like I kind of like to have two, especially now that I'm starting to get more into games that are more challenging, like mechanics wise. I also like to have a game where I can just like decompress with. So the game that I've been playing that's challenging is Tunic. I've been streaming that game, and I need more games that on the outside look very wholesome, but are also very challenging. Like that's exactly my jam. Because yeah, you play as like an incredibly adorable fox, and you're kind of in this world that you don't really know what happened. And the way you start learning about stuff is by finding different pages of a manual, but the manual is in a language that you don't know. So it's so much about like overthinking, which I overthink. So the game and I just are in the same wavelength of like, oh, I probably shouldn't do this, but no, you should. That's how the game works. So it's been really fun and challenging for me. But it also has great accessibility options if people might be more into the exploration piece, but don't really want to worry about fighting different bosses. That you can, there's a lot of option there as well, which I appreciate. And then the game that I've been playing kind of more off stream to decompress is Wildflowers, which I know Lilith has been immersed in that game more recently. Yeah, I think actually this is a game that I might talk about later because it's very queer and it just has so much. But just as a summary, so it's a farming sim game with some witchy aspects to it, but it's much more narrative driven than say other farming games like Stardew or other, the more well-known games. It's much more about the story as you kind of play like an existing character. But again, the entire like all the people that you interact with in the game are very queer and very diverse in different aspects, and the story is also really well written.
Here.
So my current games rotation is very mainstream gamery right now. I have a friend group that consistently invites me to play League of Legends with them, and that is a love-hate relationship with that game. And then occasionally, when I'm not feeling burnt out on it, we sort of talked about this previously. Genshin Impact is a game that is enjoyable in certain amounts, and then it becomes a lot to keep up with. And Star Rail just came out by the same company, and I kind of lost all of my free time this past week to that game. So I am now entirely caught up with all of the content that is in that version of the game.
Iconic.
Which, oops, but yeah, that's pretty much all I'm playing at the moment. But I play everything all the time when I am capable of doing so. I don't know. I don't really play a lot of games right now. Working in games makes it
I was gonna say
weird.
Mm-hmm. I was like, that is such a mood. Like sometimes when your 9 to 5 is games, it's like, you know what I want to do actually? I want to read a book. It's like anything but games, just for a little bit.
I'm gonna go lie down and think about not video games. I don't know. It's weird.
No, I feel that. I stream games and definitely make a big part of my content showing off new games. So I feel like I do this thing where I play a little bit of a ton of games, and I love that so much. And my reaction to those games is very public, and it's like its own kind of experience. But then when I'm having free time, I have found that I absolutely need to have some games that are just for me. I definitely have gaming as like a major part of my routine. And I think it's because, and we're going to talk about this later, but I think it's because I've connected it to my mental health and like how I maintain my mental health. So I definitely game all the time, even off stream. But I think that I sort of gravitate to games that I wouldn't normally play on stream for those moments so that I can keep the stuff that I'm streaming feeling fresh. So I feel like I tend to do most of my like very cozy indie gaming off like online, and then offline I tend to be doing things like Genshin Impact and Star Rail. I'm not as far as you. I think, halfway to where you are.
It's probably for the best. I don't recommend being as far as I am in that game.
But I'm loving it. But I tend to do more of the like maybe more action, open world. I love an open world game. I love a game where I can create my own character too. So I'll play a lot of open world action RPG games offline. The one kind of, I think I play pretty much everything in my free time except for platformers. I just can't do that. I will play them on stream reluctantly if they're cute and gay, but other than that, like, I can't imagine doing that for fun. Like,
Me too. Like, I choose Celeste for fun, so I can't say more.
You don't
I
like
could
the
never
challenge
finish
of
Celeste.
overcoming,
I just
climbing the mountain? I'm wearing my Celeste hoodie right
Are
now,
you
actually.
really? I mean, I have to play
Yeah.
Celeste because I have to. One day
It's
I
tough.
will do it, but
It is tough.
I have not yet. I can feel Fierce gazing through my soul right now, but I haven't yet.
No, but
I
no, I
mean-
mean, I think like games ultimately need to have like a way where you play it, and Celeste is very much a platforming game. So like it's definitely one of its downsides that like platforming. Unfortunately, it is like a very specific technique of playing games that it can be hard if you're just not used to that for sure.
I do love that a lot of platformers have pretty solid accessibility options now that I will like not even hesitate to turn on immediately. So I'm a big fan of that. But yeah, I pretty much, other than that, I play it all. I'll even play a little bit of horror, but not a lot because I'm kind of a wimp.
I love a good horror.
Yeah, I like you know what? If there's a lesbian in it, I'll play it. But
Fair.
if there's no if there's nothing like that in it, I might not. I might.
You know what you're into, and that's really all that matters.
I have specific tastes.
I love that.
But yeah, no, I'm all about the variety too. It seems like a lot of us are, which is there's so many wonderful games out there. It's just a shame to just stick to one kind. So
I would argue that there are too many wonderful games out there and not enough time to consume them all.
yeah. I'm also seeing this thing with a lot of them where they don't have endings. Like they just keep going and going and going. And then there's like this pressure to like not miss like limited events for them or constantly like new DLC, and I'm just like, okay, but if you could end so I could go to the next one, that would be great.
Which is another reason indie games are great, because many of them are just a few hours, or
Yes.
No,
you can
definitely. Like,
play it in
sometimes
a sitting and then
yeah, people complain of like, oh, I want like a big, like a 80-hour game, and I'm like, no, I want like a 2-hour game that I can like finish in a sitting. Like, I personally love those games.
I love a game that you can do in one sitting in a single afternoon. I feel like there's not enough of them. And I think it's because people complain, right? I mean, I don't work in games, but I would imagine that maybe that's why. I don't know. But I love that. I think that's great. You can like really make it a moment, get all comfy, make a tea.
Mhm. It's very self-carey to be able to be like, this is all I'm doing. No one can burst this bubble.
Yeah.
like there's definitely a huge need for those long gaming experiences, and I love playing a 200+ hour RPG, but I don't always have the time to sit down and play 200 hours of an RPG. So yeah, let me turn something on for an hour to 3 and then have my complete experience and be done with it.
Yeah.
Great.
It also helps when you're anything like me and your brain doesn't know how to shut off and go to the next thing. So the game ending is sometimes really important.
I completely understand that. But also then you might run into the issue of just playing the game, well, not really an issue, but playing the game multiple times.
Stardew Valley, yeah.
Yeah, like Sayonara Wild Hearts. I've played that game so many times, and I have listened to the soundtrack over and over and over because I just hooked onto it, latched onto it, and I love it. But I can't
Love
say
that.
that's a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. Do you all feel like you've seen any kind of change in how you approach games or what you like in a game over time? I know, a half of you work in games, so maybe that has had an impact. Anything, that you worth sharing on that topic? Same, Elise.
I don't think anything has changed with how I approach games in any way, except it's the same thing I had when I first watched a behind the scenes video for a film, and I was like, whoa, people make that? Like, it doesn't just appear on screen. Like, there are people behind a camera, there are people in a writer's room who work together and put that across. Weirdly, it's like the same thing there, where working with devs and seeing like the passion people have, even when things aren't going like exactly how they want them to or exactly how players want them to, it's just like, oh yes, these are real people who care a lot about what they're doing. And no matter what game I'm playing, no matter if I'm enjoying it or not, if it's a long game or a short game, if it's an action adventure, if it's an indie, I'm just like, real people put so much into this, and I'm so much more aware of that, which potentially is like something that should have been obvious from the start, but it just made me far more conscious. And I think it's something that should be kept in mind, especially like working in communities. I do find sometimes there'll be people who will kind of forget that they're talking to a person, that there are people that they're interacting with. They're not just words or an icon on a screen. Like, that's a real person.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only thing that has sort of become more apparent to me.
That's a really important point. I think we'll talk probably more about that when we get to talk, like, communities and things, but that is definitely a problem. even on the community member side, like people sometimes forget about the humanity behind the Discord icon, you know?
Oh yeah.
I think for me, the biggest change has been I no longer see video games and my interest in gaming as this like thing I need to do less of. Like, I had always this pressure that it was like a waste of time, that it was like, you know, just, well, I mean, apart from the gender stuff that I eventually just stopped listening to, but like I always still had this feeling like when I was playing video games, I was wasting my time or not doing something productive. And I wholeheartedly do not see it like that anymore. I actively make time in my day to just relax and play games. And I feel very confident that it like is making a difference in my life. So I think that's really the biggest change for me over time, is that like I do not ever see it as a negative thing anymore. I'm assuming we all had that kind of pressure when we were probably younger, right? It was just how it was shown, right?
Yeah, even nowadays, like I talk with some of my friends on like video games, and like some of, you know, luckily I didn't have that prohibited in my childhood, but some friends is like you cannot, like it was just not even an option regardless of their gender or, you know, anything. It was just not an option for them. So I completely agree with you, Lewis. I mean, even though my parents would let me play games, like it's something that I would really hide and not tell like my friends or anyone else when I was much younger. And then it's funny because even some friends that like I had back in elementary school, that now because of Twitch and streaming, I've been kind of, you know, sharing that more openly. I'm kind of connecting back with older friends.
Oh, I love
because
that.
it's like, oh, I'm also really into gaming. Like I see Triana who in chat. I saw her earlier today, and she's one of those friends that like I'm like, oh my god, if I would have been more verbal about how much I like games when we were younger, we would probably been as close as we are now, way back in elementary school. So it is. Point being, I completely agree with you, Lila. Same, very similar experience.
I believe my taste and my journey of gaming has definitely shifted a lot over the years. I am a very competitive person, I will say, I will admit to, and I know that is not the best quality at times. We can talk about this more when we talk about community. But in order to detach from that and step back, I think that's where indie games came into play for me, and the more relaxing, chill experiences are much nicer to get into when those games are tilting. um, but I think I would have to agree with the connectivity of it being the draw and like those connections with old friends and being able to maintain those relationships. I would say is probably the biggest part of gaming for me. But to your previous point about like it being something you weren't really supposed to do or it being a waste of time, I think even to this day, I still feel that guilt in the back of my mind when I'm playing games, especially when it's like there's something else I could be doing that would be better. Like, oh, I still need to do that. I need to clean. I need to whatever it is. There's always that feeling that taking that free time is wrong, which is hard to work through. But
It is.
I don't know.
If my mom is around, it comes right back. I'll be
Ugh,
like,
yeah.
I'll be chilling with my Nintendo Switch. And if my mom is around, I'm like, oh, I have to hide that I'm doing this. And I'm like, what? I'm an adult? Like, no, I don't. I'm literally seeing you because it's like the holidays. I'm relaxing. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Especially, it's the worst when you know you have no obligations and you are in your free time, but you
Yeah.
still feel that pressure. I don't know. It's
yeah.
Ugh.
There's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
We are going to take a little wellness break. We encourage chat to do it along with us. We're going to just break for a couple of minutes so that panelists can get some water, go to the bathroom if they need to. We have lots more to talk about and also some games to show off when we return. So everybody stay tuned, but do get some water, stretch, do whatever you need to do. And we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. BRB, everybody.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you stretched. I hope you got some water or some tea. I was saying in the chat, my room has gotten very hot. It's like the first hot day of the spring here today. It's beautiful, but it's hot. And my cat was like, the second I opened the door, he ran out. He was like, I do not want to be in this hot box. Like, I thought he just wanted to cuddle me. I think he was asking me to leave.
Oh,
No, I know my cat Charles is usually here, and he's out.
It's
Same
hot by
reason.
you too. Oh.
Yeah, I do have Gracie. She's still here, but she does like warmer temperatures. But Charles is like, nope, it's too warm.
I was going to wear, I have a sweatshirt that I'll actually show off later during the show and tell portion for one of my favorite games with Queer Rep. And I was going to wear it. And then I was like, no. And I'm so glad that I didn't because it's very hot.
that's fair.
All right. So let's see, where are we at? We are at one of my favorite, little segues here. So, we are all here today because we are in some way interested or passionate about indie games in particular. And I forgot that I had this question. I'm the one that wrote the questions and I forgot. So I sort of kind of answered this myself already. But I'd love to hear from others if you remember or if there's anything that sticks in your mind about what kind of led you to an interest in indie games in particular, or if it's something that you've just always been interested in. Anything.
Yeah, no, for me, I do have a very clear answer of that. I was very fortunate that, I was already with my partner and he recommended me Stardew Valley. Like I played Stardew Valley before like Animal Crossing. Like I felt like originally like so many of the games I would play would still be very limited just because of the games that like, oh, I'll buy you all Nintendo games. But Nintendo it'd be like exclusively like Mario games. I didn't even play Pokemon or Zelda when I was like growing up. It was very limited. And then when I started, dating my partner, he brought up Stardew as a game that he thought I would like. And it was the first game that I think I played for so many hours in compared to so many other games. Like it was that first like I didn't realize I could like enjoy so much a game that I'd spend over 100 hours on it. That was like that was big for me. And just like and how much there is, especially with the modding community, which I'll talk more about that when I talk about Celeste. But so then I played that, and then I wanted to play more similar games, and that was close to when Animal Crossing New Horizons came about. Which is funny for me. I played Animal Crossing because I thought it was similar to Stardew, which I think for most people is the other way around. And Animal Crossing consumed me even more so than Stardew. Just it coming at the same time as the pandemic happened and lockdown and all of that. I know many of us got the same experience. But it was once I unfortunately did go through some sort of burn down from Animal Crossing, where I wanted to find similar wholesome cozy games, and that's when I found the wholesome games curator page, and that's when I went full indie because I realized that even though many AAA games might not have that like audience in mind, fortunately for a lot of indie devs, they know that we're an audience. They know that there will be so many people that will play cozy, wholesome games, about so many different things, like from having your own donut factory to like, I don't know, just like the variation of it is so vast, but they all have the same like wholesome theme one way or another. And I think that's when I went full indie. It's just because I found the games that I was particularly passionate about, and most of them fell under the indie game category.
So I'm not really certain when I first got into indie games. It was just kind of something that happened at some point. I played one or two, or like I never really made a distinction between AAA and indie until like it started becoming a topic that people talked about more. I just liked playing cool, weird games, and as things evolved, I've learned that I gravitate more towards indies because they being smaller studios and not having to maintain the, the yearly Call of Duty cycle, or, what all the other AAAs do, they are more free to do just really weird and like explore different themes and go into different directions that would not be quite as possible with a lot of these other bigger titles. And I just love exploring these different kinds of worlds.
Mm. I definitely feel that. Like, I think there is a freedom that indie devs have, which isn't afforded to all devs. And some of the stories we get out of them are just fantastic. For me, it sounds bad, but when I first moved to London for university, I had brought my PlayStation with me, and I used to, before I played that, I'd steal my brother's games very often. Like, he'd buy a game, and I'd go, "Great, when you're finished with it, it's mine, and I get a free game." And then after that, I was like, "Oh no, I want to play these games. It's actually really helpful for me as I'm going through this very stressful period in my life when I'm like in a new city, meeting people, doing uni stuff." And I ended up buying a lot of indie games or coming to them because often they are better priced, and I could find them in places like in CEX quite cheap. And I was like, I don't really know much about this game, but it's available and accessible. And that was how I remember I bought Abs. It was probably the first real indie game I ever played. And I was like, wow, considering this was a much more manageable price for me as in my current position, the story that I've got out of it has been incredible. And I probably should look into like what this is and like where I can find things like this. And I was like, oh, there are all these other indie games that I can get and I can play and I can enjoy that right now is just more accessible. And since then I've just been like, even when I could potentially am in a better position, I'm just like, the indie games are so interesting and powerful, and I've like stuck with them since. And then I think I was very much kind of introduced to even more of the indie world when I got my job at an indie game PR firm, and was like, wow, this is I'm one of a small pond of all these incredible creators and streamers and devs and everyone. And I was like, I like it here. This is a good place to be.
I resonate with so much of that, Alex. Especially, I think the affordability is such an interesting thing that I honestly hadn't even thought of, but that was a major thing that made me decide to purchase and download Greece when I played it. So, I hadn't even thought of that being a possible entryway, but it definitely probably is. But even being what I feel is probably very much on the outskirts of the like indie gaming community, as like, in terms of like people actually working on the games, even being just on that sort of boundary, it feels like a very special and welcoming and like honestly like loving community. I don't know if I'm just seeing the good parts, but I will say, like, I'm going off of Twitter, and usually Twitter is not where you go to see the good parts. So maybe this is an accurate thing to say, I don't know, but it does feel like a very loving community. So I don't know. I love that about it. I already told chat that my entryway was that game, but it's funny that you mention Stardew, Fierce, because I had already been playing Stardew, and I didn't even think of Stardew at the time as an indie game. It was just this game that I had found and it was recommended to me and that I played. And so it wasn't until like I started to like, really get into this that I started to do that separation and think about what the separation meant. And I think for me, and this you touched on, Yared, and actually a bunch of you touched on it, for me, the separation is this freedom of storytelling and experimentation. And often I find representation that you see in indie games and not so much or much slower in more mainstream games. And so that leads me to I mean, maybe we could talk about why that might be if folks know. But also, what are some of your favorite games, indie games in particular, that have queer representation that you can think of? I have many, but I'll let you all talk first.
No, I have many, but Wildflowers, I think this is where I can spend more time talking about it. Like, I even been looking more at like the studio behind it. And I guess if you play the game, fun fact, in like the main area, there's like a pride flag. And originally that was just like a placeholder for their town. But then they eventually realized, oh, wait, like this fits so well into our game.
I
But
didn't
even
know
just
that.
right? But even just from the fact that like the people behind this game are the people that would put a pride flag as a placeholder, I feel like that says so much about the peeps behind the game, right? And like, yeah, no, I mean, I can talk so much about Wildflowers, but just with respect to the representation, it's not only just the representation on queer people. You know, you have like a gay couple that you even go to are are able to attend their wedding at the in the game, or you have someone who's like very like openly bisexual or even a non-binary character. Like you not only have that queer representation, but a very intersectional representation as well, which for me that like that's what representation is, just representation as a whole in gender, sexuality, nationality, ethnicity, like in everything. And yeah, like you know, for example, for the gay couple, like one of them is Latino and he's much more shy about being open about being gay with his family, and is not as close with his family because of that. And you know, me being from Mexico, it's like, yeah, like I did this is I understand that. Like that's definitely unfortunately more likely if you come from that background than, you know, from other backgrounds, for example. So it's like you can hassle that, but then at the same time you can tell that it's the reason why the representation is so genuine is because the team behind the game is also very queer and like very much understands what it means to be part of that community. So and you know, yeah, I can talk so much about the game, but I think that kind of gives like a good introduction to why the representation is so wonderful.
Yeah, Fierce Knows. I just recently started playing the game. I wanted to play it when it first came out, but I put it off because it has these themes of grief and loss, and I was in a place where I simply couldn't handle it at the time. But oddly, now that I'm going through it, I wanted to play it. I don't know, it's catharsis, whatever. And I'm playing it, and my partner who's in the chat right now, Sulky, she comes over and she's like, what is this game and why is it so gay? Like that person using they them pronouns, that like that woman just described herself as a queer woman and is hitting on you, and there's a pride flag in the and like are there any non-queer people in this game? And I was like, honestly, not many. So it's such a good one to pick up on. Fierce. Good. I totally agree. It's a great one. Should be on everybody's list.
Agreed.
I did write it down.
Oh, perfect. Heck yeah.
I think probably one of my favorite games that has queer representation is probably Hades. I picked up the game because it just looked like a cool roguelike about gods, and as you get into it, the story starts developing. Also, all the characters are hot. Just gonna say that. And then as the story starts developing, there are like relationship building aspects, and some of the options are, you know, different sides of the aisle, and it is nice that you are able to choose as the main character. And actually, it's probably the only game that I have played or seen or heard of that also includes poly representation, because you can date multiple characters in the game. And that is something that is very rarely ever even discussed or represented accurately in media. So that really surprised me. And I loved that. Another game that is something that really touched my heart, Sayonara Wild Hearts. It is a beautiful journey through heartbreak, and it is just told through an album, and just the way it represents love and discovery, self-discovery, is just gorgeous. And I highly recommend anybody to just take the hour or so that it takes to play that one through. And then one more game, hashtag shameless plug. Um, Princess Farmer is unashamedly sapphic, and it is beautiful and gorgeous and hilarious and cute. And I love the devs of that game with all of my heart. They are an amazing couple, and you should go play their game.
I'm actually playing it this week. I was meant to play it a couple weeks ago for the I think it was women-led games thing. I think that's what it was. So it's been on my like, oh my god, I gotta play this, and I'm so excited. I'm even more excited now. I called it a sapphic game in my head just because I don't know, it just gave me the vibes, but I didn't know it was actually like fully.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Extremely
Yes.
so.
Oh, I'm
There
excited.
is, in the mobile version of the game, we needed ad bumpers, or not needed, but they decided to put in ad bumpers, and one of them, or the idea came from the Who's That Pokemon little ad bumpers, but instead it's just we recorded it in the office, got everybody into like the little booth, and we are all screaming, "Who's that lesbian?" And
Stop!
it's hilarious.
I'm so ready. That's amazing. That's so funny.
Oh my god, no, I can just say like, I'll help you with the plug, because I know Whitethorn Games got the Humble Bundle recently, and I saw a notification, and I grabbed a bunch of games that I've been meaning to play, and Princess Farmer is one of them. So I'm also very excited to play it very soon.
I share a bunch of discords with Fierce, and I think Fierce went around and put the announcement about the Whitethorn Humble Bundle in every single one.
Oh yeah.
Humble games, like, it's like the best of both worlds. You get games for yourself, you help charities, and whenever I see a really good bundle in all servers, I post that. So yeah, that was the most
You
recent
should
one
put
I was
Fierce on the
sharing.
payroll, I swear.
Just yeah, launched. Oh, today, Sunday, launched 2 days ago. Humble Bundle, Whitethorn specific.
Yeah,
Go get some cozy, enjoyable games and support the Trevor Project.
definitely. We should actually get a link for that. I don't know if one of my mods is able to
got
do
you. I'll
that.
find one.
Oh, awesome. Actually, you might not be able to put a link in the chat. I think it might need to be
Valid.
one of my mods. Mods, it
Understandable.
should be in the gaming channel of the Discord. If you want to grab that and plop it in the chat somewhere, that would be awesome.
Goodness. Yes. I feel like I lost track there. I was like enjoying the Princess Farmer chat so much. I was like, yeah, that's great. Wait, what am I meant to be doing? Oh yeah. But for me, I think it has to be Night in the Woods. I feel like I don't know if there's something I should be reading into about the fact that most of my favorite games with queer representation are like when they're so low key, because it's just I just find it it's relatable, and like that's what I find Night in the Woods is in so many different areas of the game. Like the fact that the main character brings it up, the fact that she is pansexual maybe a handful of times, and almost like a blink and you can miss it kind of thing. I just think it's really nice because you can tell that it came from a place of real people don't like always run around going, "Hi, I'm super gay." Like you don't. That's not a real thing. Like some people do, and I love
I mean,
that.
I do.
I mean, I also wear what I wear, and like I feel like it's almost just you get it. Like playing the game, I was like, I know that you're an anthropomorphic cat, but you are giving me vibes. And so are the other characters. And then obviously you have the gay couple of Greg, the crocodile, and August. No, Augustus is the bear in the game I work on. What's the name of the?
I'm so bad with
Angus.
names, so I play the game. But
Wait,
Oh,
was
yeah.
that an Augustus is queer confirmed?
No,
Link
no.
that we just heard.
I wish. I mean, I don't know. I can get in touch with the dev and find out. But no, Angus from Night in the Woods, that's his name, are this queer couple, and they're very open about it in the game without it being this overly pushed thing that didn't feel right for the characters, because they're both quite, I don't know what the word is. It's not in their characters for them to be going around shouting it at everyone around them. They're just like, this is us. We exist. We're here. Yeah, get on with it. And I just played that game thinking like, these are real people who would be my friends. Like these people act like the way me and my friends act, my little queer community act. And playing that game, which also looks at like the mundanity of hometown life, which I think a lot of queer people can kind of relate to, in the idea of wanting to get out, because often you might feel a bit stuck in the hometown where maybe not everyone has been accepting, or all that jazz. And I just think that game is just very melancholic and very relatable, and plays around with queer themes in a way that really hits home for me, and I just think it's just so beautiful.
I love that. I laugh a little bit at this like idea of like the queer themes or the queer characters being like almost understated, because I feel like I have this ability to read queerness into like every game. So like thinking about like what are queer games that I can recommend? I'm like, well, all of them, obviously. Like it's just they're all like, I mean, I feel like these days almost every single cozy indie I play has some degree of queerness to it, but I'm like, am I making it up? Is it actually there? I don't know.
I think that's a superpower to have, Lilith. I always like admire that you can just like you just know.
I just know. Which is why everybody should believe my theories on Taylor Swift. I'm just saying.
Could see it.
But I think, I mean, one example of this, and maybe we could have confirmation, I don't know, but I would call the game Teacup a queer game, but there were no like overt, like, I don't think queer characters in it. Were there? Wait, maybe there were lesbians. I don't remember. Somehow I don't
recall
remember.
off the top
I
of
can't
my
remember
head.
if I made them up or not, but I would call it a queer game because it's like a bunch of like queer friends making tea to hanging out. Like, I mean, this to me, it's like, queer game. But anyway, in terms of like actually queer games, and I'm going to share more about this later, but I would 100% echo everything said, but I would also add to the list Lake, because actual sapphics in the game that you can hang out with and get to know, and romance. So plus you are delivering mail in a like charming 1980s town, and there's cats, and you can just drive around a mail truck. I mean, it's great. It's a sapphic game.
Yeah. Very much so.
But yeah. So we're talking about how indie games in particular seem to be a little bit better with queer representation. I would also say with representation in general, we're starting to see lots of different identities represented. I, not to be all like Whitethorn Games today, but I just played the demo for Mythwrecked, and I was so excited by the trailer for that to see disability rep, which is something that I do not see often in games at all. We talked a little bit about how like polyamory rep needs to be more of a thing, but we're seeing a lot of different representation, and I think that indie games are definitely leading that charge. So I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts on like why that is so powerful. I mean, I think a lot of us could probably say why that is so powerful, but maybe to you in particular, and also like why you think that is the case. Is there something what's happening in those indie studios that's so special? And I have suspicions, but I'd love to hear from you all first.
I can start if you want. So I will say it's, for us at Whitethorn, it's just a reflection of who we are as people. I would say probably 80 to 90+% of our studio is somewhere in the LGBTQ plus community. So we are just finding and supporting and publishing and creating games that we can see ourselves in. And it helps to, one, reaffirm our own existences, but also the existences of others who might not have quite as much representation yet. And we really want to make games approachable and accessible to everyone. And for me personally, it is a huge impact because even to this day, I sort of struggle to, I don't know, admit isn't quite the word for it, but what I am. And I don't like being defined by labels, but having the support of everyone around me makes it easier to feel comfortable in my identity. I don't know.
No, that's so real. That's so real.
Yeah, I think it comes down to communities, and like video games have such a powerful way to create communities and foster communities on their own. Like, regardless of representation, there are so many co-op games, there are so many games that people can come together around, that it makes sense for representation to become such an important aspect of that, because you can find the people who not only enjoy video games, but also have that shared experience of queerness, disability, anything of the sorts. And it just helps create these like smaller circles, which still may be huge communities, but it's like we have this shared experience that just brings us together. Yeah.
No, I think definitely.
Yeah, and especially, and like besides the communities, like even though I'm no game dev, but I feel like I've been interacting with more game developers just by me showcasing games and then giving me a key, and then sometimes, well, I guess that's the point. Like, I think it is such a personal thing, in some cases it might be just one person or like a bunch of friends, like how happened with Celeste, of like, let's make a game. And for example, Celeste, so much so it was a personal story that even the dev behind the game, Maddie Thorson, did this before she realized it was trans. Like, so much of the experience of making the game and putting her own experience to Madeline, the main character of the game, was portraying that same experience that she was facing, that then years later she realized, oh, of course this story is like a trans story, but back then it was just putting so much of who she is and her experience. I think so much of it just comes down from that like personal story being shared in a video game, that I see that so much. And again, Celeste is an example, but I as someone who is from Mexico, I really try to showcase games by the Latino community, and like I always try to like really look up what games like, oh, this is like a Mexican dev team or so on and so forth. And one that I play more recently is Lonesome Village, um, about you being like a little fox and doing little like side quests. It's very wholesome because you kind of do puzzles, but like the way you keep moving within the puzzles is by friendship, like just by being friends with the people in the village. You get kind of hearts, and then those hearts keep moving forward in the puzzle area. And it has so many little secret like Mexican references. Like there's like this song called La Vaca Lola, the cow Lola, that the cow in the game was named Lola. And I'm like, I get this reference. Like even just small things like that. Like I just feel so connected to like where I'm from, and like no, it's very clear to me that the people behind the game are also from Mexico. So it's definitely a very personal story. I think whenever indie games in particular put part of who they are into a game.
Yeah. I think that that's I think that that's the key, right? Like a lot of the time it is these smaller teams, communities that they have a story to tell, and it's usually a lot of times it's a personal one, and it's a reflection of the teams that are making it. And I think that that's just so incredibly special, and I want to see that just become even more of a thing in mainstream AAA games as well. Like it's just I think it's so incredibly meaningful seeing yourself, or even just seeing people who are completely different from you reflected in a game. I've found for a long time that like reading is how I interpret the world, understand the world, get different perspectives. And more I'm realizing that I can also do that in games these days. And I don't feel like that used to be the case. Like a lot of the stories that were told in games when I was playing them were very specific people that were nothing like me and nothing like the people in my communities. And I was not, really learning too much other than like one perspective. And these days I feel like, I mean, not to bring up Wildflowers again, but like I'm learning about cultures I didn't know about from that game. And I just feel like even more connected, and then I want to learn even more. And this is a fictional game about a witch, like but the stories are real, and I love seeing that, and I want to see it more and more and more. And I think we are seeing it. And then the other thing that I think is such a simple change, but I've been seeing it all the time, is pronouns. When you're creating a character, even a simple collection of pixels at the start of a game, having the ability to decide that I want they, them pronouns, having the ability to change my pronouns as I play the game, so that if I wake up tomorrow and my, gender effery has decided that I'm using different pronouns that day, I can change them in my game. And that's huge, and I'm seeing that in so many games nowadays. And that's such a simple thing that can be added. At least it seems simple to me. I don't know, maybe on the coding side it's not, but it seems simple to me. And it means the world. So yeah, that's where it's at. So, I mean, this kind of leads us to our next question, but is there anything, maybe, actually I might skip that question. I was going to say, what do you think indie games are doing particularly well these days? Does anybody feel like they have something to add to that we haven't already said?
Actually, I do.
You do? Okay. You're like, don't skip that question.
So I think went to that question just to make sure
I'm prepared for this.
No, because I think like Celeste and games like Stardew have things to share here. I think they both really focused on the speedrunning community and the modding community, which that's something that AAA games just honestly like hurt that community. Some cases, like if the speedrunning community finds something that it's really good for them to like go to the next screen and like almost like hack, like find like, oh, there's like a little glitch here that helps you now go to the next room. Like sometimes AAA games is like, oh, we're patching that, like you won't be able to do that anymore in your speed run. And like, or with modding community, I mean, unfortunately Nintendo is very against that and many AAA games of like, no, like we have this game that we wanted to be experienced this way. But I think it just loses so much of like the game still being alive by the modding community and the speedrunning community, that they put their time, their like experience or knowledge into making the game bigger, into finding little secrets in the game or little glitches in the game. And for example, I'm no like I've never done any speed running games. I've never like speed run any game. I've never modded for a game, but
Yes.
Celeste community is giant in both of those two like areas. And just because I've been getting more into Celeste recently, I'm kind of more exposed to those communities, and these communities keep the game alive. Like I'm very recent. It's always going to be there, but you know, again, there's so many different games that like sometimes if a game came out years ago, you know, maybe a newer generation might not play it, but like if the modding community keeps adding stuff to the game, then it's more likely for someone that's getting into gaming to still learn about this game that came out years ago. I mean, I recently played a mod of Celeste called Strawberry Jam, which is probably 5 times as big as like the base game. And that's just one mod of like hundreds of mods that Celeste has. That was like my first introduction to mods in Celeste, because it was so big that like even the developers started retweeting and reposting stuff, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should try into modding, you know, to try and download mods. And of course, like the modding community, they're the community itself. Like they know what like people want of the game, so they really put so much of themselves and like the game itself. Like I can just speak about this for hours, because it's like it's these two communities unfortunately get like ignored by AAA games, that I think they bring so much life to the games themselves.
That is such a good point.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I completely agree. I was working on a game that very recently got released, and from the start they were like, we are releasing this game with speedrunning being encouraged. We want to see if anyone can actually beat our time. Like the devs are like, we can do this so fast. If anyone can beat us, we're gonna be well impressed. So we want to see if anyone can. And secondly, like we want mod support, because they recognize that community and also recognize both the creativity that it can help encourage, but also the accessibility, because there are mods out there for so many different games which are like can help make games more approachable for people who have certain needs. And I think that can be hugely overlooked as well as part of it. And anything where, you know, something that's going to bring people to your game, you should do, because, you know, there's no point in having mechanics that will be like, yeah, we're not going to budge on these mechanics because this is what we want to do. And if you can't, you know, get over that, then, you know, just don't play the game. I'm like, no, why would you not want people to play your game? Because you're bringing people into a community. Like, I don't get that.
Yeah. I mean, and mods also, at least, you know, the communities that I'm mostly a part of in terms of like modding games are Stardew and The Sims 4. And those mods, and I would say this is mostly true for The Sims 4, have actually informed the choices that the Sims 4 is making about the game. Like they recognized that through like modding that we needed, you know, better trans rep. We needed, you know, a bunch of different sorts of ways of expressing ourselves through custom content, right? And you're seeing that now reflected in the actual game that's being, you know, the patches that are being released and the additional content that you can buy and stuff, the kits and stuff. You're seeing that all being reflected, but it was done in mods first. And so I think there's something special about like listening to modding communities, because like you said, I think Fierce, that's your community. It's a reflection of the community that you've got. So you should really look at what's going on there and listen to them and you know, keep that in mind. I think it's so special when that happens. And forget it, Stardew. I mean, I've been playing Stardew for how long now? And I just started a new playthrough, and it feels completely different because it's got a different community center. I'm exploring an entirely new town. I feel like I'm playing a new game, and it's, you know, and how many times have I played Stardew? I have, you know, the base game memorized at this point, you know? That's a really good point to bring up. I'm glad we didn't skip the question.
No, brother, because it's funny, like, because I mean, it's natural that many of the questions that you were like, thinking of kind of answer each other and
Yeah.
help each other. But I think this was like this was like, no, this is like where we can give a space to the modding and the speedrunning community, like especially the speedrun community. Like that's a completely different way to play the game. That's like, I don't know. I just admire speedrunners because it's like it's just a very different take, and there's an audience for that like enjoys games like that. So just help them enjoy your games, like as easy as that.
Shouts out to Summoning Salt on YouTube for the in-depth dives into a specific game's journey through speedrunning and the world records as they evolve.
Love that. I'm not familiar, but that sounds like a good time. I love watching speed runs. I could never do them. I know for a fact I could never do them. I'm way too slow and like confused to be a speed runner, but I like watching them. I think they're so fun to watch.
I want to learn a handful of just like casual ones that are short, just to know how. But
I've been seeing people do Stardew ones, which I think is so funny.
okay, full disclosure. Feel free to revoke my indie fan card, but I have never played Stardew.
Oh my goodness. Well, nothing has been revoked, but I do think you should play it.
Yeah, that means you are gonna come out of this panel with even more games to play.
I could give you a list of great mods if you want.
I'd have to start vanilla though.
So we've been talking a lot about like what we are loving about indie games today. Is there anything that you'd like to see more of? What is missing? I mean, we mentioned polyamory. That always comes up. Whether I'm doing a panel on indie games or fiction, doesn't matter. All the time, it's always like there's not enough polyamory rep, and it's so true. But what else?
Anything.
What would you like to see more?
I'll just say, if I was a teenage exocolonist, has really good polyamorous.
Good
rep.
shout. Good
Oh
shout.
my God, I almost forgot. I'm like, yeah, no. Just wanted to shout out that game.
Another shout out to my friends at Finji. Love you guys.
Yeah, by Finji. So Tunic is made by Finji.
Night in the Woods.
Night in the Woods as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, Finji is great.
Incredible.
All of the people that work there are amazing. I love them.
Oh, yes, even better.
It shows.
It shows exactly.
I have something for this, which I think is trigger warnings. Because a lot of games do have trigger warnings, but a lot of them tend to just put them on like the Steam page, for example, which is obviously good. Rather have them there than nowhere. But often they can be easily missed. Often by the time you get to playing the game, you have maybe forgotten or don't think to check. And we have a game I'm currently working on is involves some quite intense themes. And one thing we've been doing a lot behind the scenes is like making sure these trigger warnings are super obvious and they can't be skipped, because they, games, when you're into a game, if you're focused, you're playing someone, they can be very, very painful. And I think a lot of games don't think about that. The game that I love for this is Dead Pets Unleashed, when they had their demo out, and the way that they allow you to even skip scenes within the game, I think is just fantastic. Like, you'll be playing through the scene and it will go, this is about to happen. Obviously, we're not going to spoil it. If you click on this, you can read more about what exactly is going to happen so you can prepare yourself. But if you don't want to do this, press this button, and then here's the summary, and then you can continue your gameplay without having that negative experience. And I think more games should be trying to look towards that and implement them both within the game or at least within spaces that can be found more clearly.
I love that. I read an article a while back that I really didn't agree with it. I'll probably butcher it, but it was something along the lines of like the idea that like wholesome games, like this, this push for like comforting wholesome games was like having like a negative effect, where like serious themes or more complex themes were harder to, like were harder to include, or were being overlooked or something along those lines. And I think they have a place in this genre of games. I in particular, like, I mean, we once again, when we talk about Wildflowers, this is a game that is comfy cozy, that is, brightly colored and comfortable, but it deals with this like very real and very human theme of grieving and loss, and you experience the loss and it's there. And I think that those stories are important to share. And I think that what you need is that scaffolding, right? Like, so that you know what's coming, if it's the right time. Like, it was not the right time for me to play Wildflowers, a couple of months ago when it came out. It is the right time for me now. And I was able to make that decision because I knew what to expect. So I think that that's like, I fundamentally agree with you, Alex. I think that like having these warnings, having them be talked about, I think that that's so important and makes it so that you can have this comfy, cozy experience, but still also deal with very real themes. I think of Spiritfarer as another one. That's a game that handles heavy themes, but it does it in a way that is soothing and comfortable, but you know what to expect. You know what that game is when you start it. So, and I think they probably could do an even better job with like, normalizing some sort of content warning at the start of a game. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, maybe hopefully in the future it'll be like a standard, the way games have to have a rating. I hope we get to the point where the games have to put content warnings. Yeah, that's such a good like answer, because I mean, and some games do that, but it's not a standard yet, unfortunately.
I'm trying to remember what it was. There's some game that replaces every spider. There's a setting where it replaces spiders with something. I'm not able to think of it right now.
It's webbed, right?
It's
Yeah, I
webbed.
think.
Yeah.
Oh, did they also do that for? It's like a game when you are shrunken down.
Grounded.
Did they? I think they also did it for Grounded.
I think they did it for
So it doesn't
that's
replace the
right.
spiders, but they just become like more orb-like. Like it's a slider,
Oh.
and like they start losing their legs, and then they just become like a blob
I love
as you
that.
get to the. Yeah.
I want to fight blobs. No spiders for me.
I don't have a problem with the spiders, but I know many people who do, and I feel like that's such a simple, like, I mean, maybe it's not simple, again, probably not simple, but it's a thoughtful, maybe I should start saying that instead. It's a thoughtful thing that makes it so that more people can enjoy it without it having to be, a stressful experience. So
I personally love spiders, but when they are gigantic in Grounded, it sneaks up on you, jumps at. Yeah, it's an experience for sure.
I think I could have used a warning for those like horrible hands that you fight in Elden Ring. I don't know how many of you on the panel today
yeah.
played.
Those are basically spiders.
They were spiders, but worse. I still dream about them. I was not ready. They're pale.
The way they wrapped around the pillars was just like
horrible.
No, thank you.
And I was a fan of all of the finger imagery in that game, but that was crossing a line. It was.
And actually kind of related to content warning, which is ultimately to kind of let more people experience your game. Accessibility is such a big one, especially actually in games that well, not necessarily especially, but unfortunately, that's a better word, like unfortunately in games that are kind of categorized as challenging, like Celeste. Like Celeste is the exception, but in many of these games, like Dark Souls games, there's almost like a pride of like, oh, this is gonna be rough. Of like, if you're putting like, if you're changing the way the game is as default, like you're not like playing the game. Where it's like, no, like why would you limit other people to experience the game as well just by adding different options? Like that's just like one level of accessibility, right? Which Celeste is really, really good. And then again, I can talk about Celeste a lot, but like for me, it's just such a great example because you have people that like completely like exploit the game, speedrunners, to people that like kind of play more casually but still have a bunch of different like You know, like for example, like I play casually, and I fall into the beginner experience of the modding community. Like the modding community, there's like 5 levels, like beginner, intermediate, hard, expert, and grandmaster. And you know, even though I love this game, I'm still very much a beginner in the modding community. Um, or even like the game, you know, you get to like the credits, but then there's like B sides that you can unlock, and then if you get really into it, you unlock C sides. Like this game is really good. But then on the other spectrum, right? Like they understand that platformers is not like a medium for playing games that a lot of people might be used to it. So then you can add like different, you know, like invincibility mode, or you can really like tone it down so that it's really an experience for you, which that's, you know, the more people can play your games, the better.
Mhm.
But and then I forgot, yeah, and then I forgot to say, you know, that's one accessibility. Both accessibility, like, you know, like projects like special effects or other different tools that, like, if you're someone with like a physical or mental disability, that you can still play a game one way or another. Like that's something that, you know, if for some reason like you can't play games with your mouse because like, you know, your arm doesn't allow you for that, if there's a way to play games with your eyes, or I don't know, I think like there could be much more creativity with that part of, you know, disability and accessibility as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think it's funny. I mean, and maybe this shows ignorance of my part, but I think it's funny because I would say that indie games are also leading a lot of the accessibility options, and you would think it would be the opposite because of like funding, right? Like perhaps it is like harder to implement a lot of these accessibility options, or is more costly, but somehow they are, I think, I mean, maybe this is just because I play mostly indie games at this point, but I think that they are really leading the charge there as well. So I mean,
Yeah, I think that comes down to, I mean, obviously it's dependent on so many different things, but I think indie devs are able to access their community much earlier than AAA games, because with AAA games, or just bigger games in general, yes, you'll have playtesters, you'll do early access maybe, but so much of that ends up being like NDA'd, being a lot shorter term, a lot smaller groups. Whereas with indie devs, at least from what I've witnessed, there's been so much back and forth between the devs and the people playing the game or who will play the game. And for example, I've seen one of the games I'm working on had someone in our Discord say, "Hey, I use one of the PlayStation disability controllers. Have you seen they're coming out like the little pad so that they can be an alternative way of using a controller." It's like, do you know if that's something you could potentially work into the game? Because I love the look of this game. I want to play this game, but this is the only way I'm allowed to, or I'm able to, sorry. And the dev was just like, yeah, we'll work on that. Like, we'll get you in, we'll get that tested so that you and anyone else who is having that experience can do that. And I don't necessarily think that's an experience that can be afforded to every type of dev.
I think that is such an incredible point, and also an incredible segue to like talking about game communities. I think from the perspective of being like a gamer in a community, but also from the perspective of leading a community or working with a community that is surrounding around games. So unless anybody had anything else to say about the previous question, I don't want to cut anyone off.
I would have just doubled down on the accessibility being a huge part.
Yeah, same, absolutely same. Is there any memories you all have of being part of gaming communities, and were like they positive or negative experiences? I know, Yared, you've mentioned having both. And I'm wondering if you wanted to like speak to that at all. Anyway,
Sure. So, competition is something. It brings out both the best and worst in people, of course. Especially when there is the anonymity of being online, and there are circles and communities around a lot of these competitive types of games that more so nowadays are very uplifting and collaborative and all about like learning and developing these skills and honing your craft. But I have definitely run into, especially previously, a lot of the toxicity that exists in these online communities, and it's hard to parse. I will say, sometimes you internalize that, and I can't say I have never participated in the flaming of other people, and sometimes you lose sight of this is supposed to be a game. This is supposed to be fun, and I think that's probably why I like indie games more so now. Though as you talked about earlier, mindfulness and being able to sit back and look at that perspective and be like, am I enjoying playing this game and getting upset at people on my team? And I think over the years, I've become able to play these competitive games without really getting upset at things. So it's nice. That's all.
I have definitely stopped playing games that were raising my blood pressure. Like the one that comes to mind is Dead by Daylight. Like that is a queer AF game and it's great and I love them for that. And my partner plays it all the time. And those are the moments where I was very grateful that I have a girlfriend who plays games and lives with me so I can be toxic just in the house. Like I don't have to be toxic online. I can just be toxic in the house, get it out of my system. Nobody sees it. You know, it's just us talking about somebody who ruined the game for everybody. But I stopped playing that game because I was like, am I having fun? I don't think I am. Like I'm angry and scared and I don't think I was having fun. So I stopped playing.
That's valid. Yeah. At the same time, it gets a hold on you and you just
I know.
need to go back.
I'm sure I'll be back at some point.
So for me, I feel almost like a fake gamer / fake community manager, in that I wasn't really part of any gaming communities before working with them, or at least outside of like video games. I was part of like TTRPG, D&D communities because I came to them earlier, as in on the community side of things. But I think growing up, when I would go to like any gaming clubs with friends or at school and stuff, I often would have like not the best experiences with them. And so when I was getting into gaming properly, I was like, you know what? I can play this online game on my own. I don't need to I can like, I'll hear anyone. I don't have to put my mic on. I don't even have to listen to them if I don't want. I'm just going to play it solo because we'll just cut out the middleman. Like we don't need to have, just no bother. I will have a better time if I just do this on my own. And I sort of stuck with that. And then it was only since getting into community management, I was like, okay, we've actually come a long way since way back. This is better. I like it here. That's nice. I'm glad that things are kind of improved since then, and now I'm on the other side of things, being able to kind of encourage communities and help build them. I'm just like, yeah, this is good.
I love that. Also, I'm just gonna like call out that casual imposter syndrome. I'm sure that you were doing community stuff that maybe wasn't in relation to games, but is just as relevant.
TTRPG communities are
right? Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I've noticed a pretty big change too, even from just when I was younger. Like I have vivid memories of playing like Mass Effect 3 online, and the second I entered, like, I guess was it a lobby back then? I don't even know. The people being like, oh, I was raised a girl. I have a pretty girly voice. And they were like, that's a girl. And like saying stuff just because of that. And then of course I like destroyed all of them because I was very good at Mass Effect 3.
Yeah.
But like, I remember that vividly. And I think that thinking about that now, it is in such stark contrast to my experience now. But I think that's because I'm very discerning about the communities that I enter, and almost all of them have a queerness to them as like either like an underlying just connection that we all share, or whether or like a central tenet, like, and I think that to me, the two have become very connected. My gaming communities are also my opportunities to spend time with other queer people, especially moving to a place where I do not have that, where I used to have that in person. I used to live right next to the West Village in Manhattan, and it was wonderful, and there were gay people everywhere, and I, could walk down the street and go to a gay bar. And now it's like not that. So I've been really leaning into online communities, and for me, the gaming communities and my queer communities are connected, and that's been big for me.
No, definitely. I think like for me, I really started getting into like gaming communities because of the pandemic. Like I always connected more with like people face to face, but with the pandemic, that was just not an option for all of us. So then that's when my Animal Crossing like obsession, fortunately having multiplayer mode, I was just, for the first time for me, just connect with people online that I only really met online, and all like like for things of like, oh, add this in your catalog, or like, I don't know, there were so many different ways where you could like visit each other's islands and just connect with each other, that for me there was a really great intro to that. And I'm very fortunate of that, because I think given the time and place where I started being more involved in gaming communities, I've had a really good experience. Because then, after Animal Crossing, I started being more involved in indie game communities, and I agree, it's such a wonderful community, especially like it's so like connected in the sense of like, in my case, I like to showcase a bunch of indie games on my Twitch channel, and sometimes like a game might be like a really small indie dev that just has this, small little wholesome game that like that I'm a huge fan of, and whenever I finish a stream, I try to send them like little clips and videos, and even just small things like that, like for them can be such a big impact. Like I have some cases where like devs might later reach out to me of like, oh, I'm gonna make this new patch, like, do you have any thoughts of like how to make this game be integrated into Twitch? And I'm always like so honored of like, oh my god, like I'm just like sharing games out here, and then devs want your feedback. But that's the thing, like it's such a small like personal community that people just really want to help each other, that like connection really goes like all ways. It's not just like the people playing the games and then like the devs, it's like all intertwined. And I love that about the indie game community.
It really does feel like a community in that sense. I totally agree, and it's very special. It's very special. Did everybody get a chance to answer this question? I don't remember.
I think so.
Okay. I've been having a lot of coffee. I feel like
Such a mood.
I'm sipping an energy drink
I
this
love
entire
it.
time,
I understand. We all get it.
running on like 2 hours of sleep.
Also, I am very excited for you that you're doing your first ever campaign. I did mine a few months back, and I'm hooked, but I can never get enough. I want another game. I feel like it's over. I don't have anyone to play with right now. I'm like,
I know.
how do I get
Indie dev TTRPG time, anyone?
I mean, if I'm
love to know.
allowed, even though I'm not.
You got my contact info.
Oh, we're getting in touch after this.
I would love it. So that sort of brings us really nicely to the fact that all of us, in some form or another, and I will hear no contrary to this, manage gaming communities, right? And I've
Never done that in my life. No.
I'm curious, what drew you you to that? Like what do you love about that? Because there's a lot to love about it, I'm sure.
I think for me, it's pretty obviously just tied to my introduction to gaming, playing them with my siblings and just the shared experience of talking about and discussing something that we shared and loved. And then I got to school and made friends. I was a super huge gaming nerd. And thankfully, the time that I went to school, and nowadays it's very commonplace to play video games. In fact, you're kind of weird if you don't, it seems like. But I don't know. I don't know. Everybody loved talking about video games, or at least I hung out with the people who love talking about video games. So that is just something I enjoy doing, and facilitating a group and enabling a group to do so is just something I am very much drawn to. I love the shared experiences and helping people reach those communities where they can feel at place talking about what they love.
I love that. So well said.
Definitely agree. I wasn't involved in video game communities prior to my job, but I did do a lot of online community building with like freelance writers. I had a Discord for freelance writers to help communicate, share pitches and get help and blah, blah, blah. And I also ran one for my university's like sci-fi and fantasy societies, doing like sharing board game things and Dungeons and Dragons things. And I loved being able to help facilitate communities coming together and friendships being made and letting people get into these stories that can end up having huge impacts on them. And I kind of stumbled into my job. Someone sent me a link saying, this company is looking for a community manager, which you sort of have experience in, and you like indie games, you like video games. And I just was very, very lucky that I got that job and was able to start helping people find these indie games and doing such silly little tasks to just get their names out. And I just love being able to interact with people and help people interact with other people, especially coming out of the pandemic. There was a bit of overlap, and I just don't think anything can beat that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something so special about like playing a game that is meaningful is great. Playing a game that is somehow meaningful and being able to like go tell people about it is just everything. Like there is nothing better than that. Even better if I can take in-game photos and share it with people and they actually want to see them. Like, are you kidding?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Having somewhere to share my game screenshots means more to me than I could say.
Yeah, and I think at least for me, like thinking about answering the question, at least, well, I started streaming kind of related to why I started Animal Crossing and connecting with people online. Like I was feeling, I don't know, I'm very like friend oriented, and I just love like making friends and meeting people. Yeah, period. And then when I was very engaged in like the Animal Crossing community, that's when I first met someone that streamed. And even for me, streaming was something very new. I mean, I would like follow YouTubers that I knew they had like a Twitch channel, but that's about it. That was like the first time in the pandemic when I started getting myself involved in Twitch. And I originally started Twitch just as a way to make friends. And I was definitely very fortunate to get to that point. But I think so much of just my channel kind of naturally growing and then having more sort of like a community, friends, or people that, I say friends because, in some cases, like friends is just people that you later can meet face to face and, play offline. But like on Twitch, sometimes it is more about like the community of just like people, not necessarily being like as engaged necessarily, but still being very much part of the community. And I think for me, the reason why, even though kind of that like, oh, I made friends and that was kind of my original goal, but like there's a reason why I'm still doing that. beyond each time meeting more people that I can connect to, friends or not, I think so much is me finding interested in games that show kindness one way or another, and realizing that games can unfortunately have the misconception that they can be very violent and aggressive. And I'm like, no, no, no. I think this is a great space for me to, show all these beautiful games that touch on kindness one way or another. And by doing that, I've met really kind people. What a surprise! But again, it's just this like you do, if you put a lot of yourself out there, then you get to find people that are very similar to you. Some that, I'm actually been planning like a wedding, and friends that I met on Twitch are going to go to Mexico for the wedding. Like that's like how close some of these friends have been, but also just again like finding people that are very similar to you and that understand these same values that you can find in games. For you, Lil, is very much mindfulness, but I think for so many of us, we found this aspect of ourselves that we get to share with others, and then they can experience that as well by seeing you play a game, or even just learning more games that might not have as big of a highlight, at least in my case, because I play a lot of indie games on my channel.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the most meaningful things for me is that my journey with like showing off games, having a gaming related Discord, all of that coincided with me being very much on like a journey of healing and unmasking. And these online spaces, these gaming communities, whether I'm hosting them or not, they get a version of me that I'm not always able to tap into offline, and they reflect back at me so much love and acceptance and like just me too, which I never expected when I started doing this ever. I never expected to build or meet a community of people who would look at me being exactly who I am and be like, yep, that's good. How you are is good. That's great. Thanks for being you. Like, what? And then to see that also so often, especially more recently, being reflected in the game stories as well, like seeing myself reflected, whether it's, my identity as like a non-binary person or a queer person or neurodivergent, whatever, however it is being reflected in games, all of that together has made me genuinely feel like I belong in the world more. And maybe that is a more like a very dramatic thing to say on a Sunday afternoon, but I fully believe it. I fully believe it, that I feel that like these gaming communities that I'm a part of, the games that I play, the spaces that I inhabit have made me feel like I belong more in the world. And I think that that is why I'm so passionate about it, because if I'm feeling that, other people must be feeling it too. And that's incredibly special.
100%.
Fierce with the heart. I love you so
No,
much.
like I completely agree. It's like so true. And like I came to terms with me being part of the LGBTQ plus community. I think so much in part of starting streaming on Twitch. Like I think just like my upbringing wouldn't necessarily, it just wasn't something as common that I know unfortunately many of us can relate. But then suddenly on Twitch it's like, wait, I'm just realizing that most of my friends are queer one way or another. So yeah, no, like also just like sharing so much of yourself, and I just agree with that so much.
I love that. So with that in mind, right? Like this gift that we are giving each other by loving each other, how can gaming communities be more welcoming and inclusive? Alex, you mentioned that incredible story of a community member being like, hey, can this accessibility feature become a thing? And then being like, yes, let's make it happen. I think that that's so magical. And that, early interaction between like gamers and the devs, I think is so special and probably is definitely the future, or it should be. So what other kinds of things is currently happening or you'd like to see happening that would make these communities that we love a little bit more welcoming and inclusive.
I believe that the first and probably biggest step is one. It has to start from the top. Like the leaders of these communities have to make sure as soon as they are established that there is no tolerance for any sort of hatred or anything that would exclude these communities. You have to start it with the intent to be welcoming. But then on top of that, it is on each individual to stand up for each other. I've noticed just in my own experience and trying to learn or unlearn the toxicity of certain things. Like when I'm playing a game and I see somebody being toxic, I will call it out and I will, point out to them that, hey, this person is just here to play a game, leave them alone. And sure, that might not mean too much, but I'm sure to that one person who was being yelled at for no reason, just having one person be on their side helps make it feel a bit better. So if we can all do that and start doing that, hopefully we can eventually shift slowly everything to be more welcoming and inclusive.
Mhm.
I think that would mean a lot to me if somebody was picking on me and some other, person I didn't know stood up for me. That would mean a lot to me. I think that's a good point.
And I think that is tied to what I think can help with welcoming, making more welcoming and inclusive spaces is just awareness. I think having issues of like disabilities, gender, sexuality, race, everything that it should. What am I trying to say? It's late in the day, okay? My brain is getting at us.
You're doing great.
Is having awareness of the problem so that people can speak up and they know how to deal with that situation. So like you said, if someone's being picked on, you can just go, hey, that's not cool. Like, just take a few to chill out with, and not necessarily then yelling back, because that people sometimes can go in with the best intentions but end up flaring or baiting, and it makes situations so much worse. So having the awareness of how to treat these things and knowing that there are problems that the industry has about these spaces and about inclusivity will help move along. And something I also think is good to keep in mind for people working in community management and this sort of job is how to protect yourself. One of the things that I've done that I've found super useful was there's a Safe in Our World, a fantastic video game mental health charity that I'm sure people know of. So good. They had a community manager mental health first aider training. And so much of that is about how to look after yourself if you're a community manager or if you are a member of a community, because you can't help others if you are not looking after yourself. And you can't forget that, because nothing will happen otherwise. You've got to make sure you are okay before anything else can change.
I've heard such good things about that. I keep meaning to do it. I know Fierce and I are in the same stream team, and a lot of folks in there have done it. Have you done it, Fierce?
No, I haven't, but yeah,
we gotta get on it.
I've only heard good things about it.
Yeah, huge shout out to Safe in Our World. Absolutely love those guys.
Yeah. That is such a good point, though. Like that idea that you need to be taking care of yourself and also have boundaries to be able to protect and support the community that you're, in charge of or supporting. Like that's huge. And I think very often overlooked. I mean, I know even for me, sometimes it's like, oh, I've got to be the one to do this. I've got to be the one to diffuse this situation and support this person who needs support. And it's just not always possible. And it's just not true. Other people are very well equipped to handle things. you know?
No, I just agree. Exactly. Don't have more to add than just completely agree.
One thing I love seeing, I'm struggling to think of an example right now, but I think this is happening pretty often these days. A game will, you know, make some sort of statement, whether often about like a queerness of a character, and will be met with, you know, disgusting stuff like online. And I love seeing them take a stance and be like, no, that is a queer character. You read that right. You all are wrong. Like I think that happened, definitely think that happened with the Last of Us show. I remember seeing people being like, oh, that's, you know, and like them being like, no, like that's always been the case. You just missed it. I think we're seeing it happen right now with Horizon. And then also there was another, The Sims, you know, because they recently had trans characters in their most recent world. And people were like, no, they did that by mistake. That was a mistake. They didn't, you know, they just wrote it in wrong. And they were like, no, here's the story about them being trans. And like, I think that makes a huge impact because it's like, you know, it shows that they're not comfortable with people not seeing the queerness that is there. They want it to be seen and they want you to be uncomfortable if it makes you uncomfortable because you need to deal with that, you know? And I think that like as a player, as a community member, that makes me feel like I'm prioritized in that game, in that space, you know, like I'm worth the risk, you know, and my people are worth the risk of losing, you know, bigots, you know? So I think that's awesome. Anything else anybody want to say about this question? Absolutely no pressure. Okay, so my last question, and then I think we should take a little break and do some show and tell. My last question, we sort of touched on a little bit, but we've been talking a little bit about like gaming and mental health. I brought this up because it's something I'm passionate about. So I was curious if anybody on this panel also thought that there was a connection or sees this in their own gameplay or is seeing this, you know, in games that are coming out. Just curious if anyone has any thoughts on gaming and mental health.
I have so many thoughts that I will not talk too much. Going back to Safe in Our World, I am a freelance writer for them. Not for them, but I'm freelance and have written for them before, because I think the link between video games and mental health is so important. Like the latest article I wrote for them is all about walking simulators and like idle sims and how they're a huge proponent for allowing the promotion of creativity and problem solving because they offer you very undemanding tasks and like story like exploration that allows you to wander these worlds whilst allowing your mind to wander and like think about things going on in life and like comfortably deal with whatever's going on. I've also spoken about Abzu and how it is a game that literally involves mindfulness and how that is one of many games that encourages you to sort of take stock of the world around you. And I know I've chatted with you about this before in like how you can make any game a mindful game. Like Breath of the Wild is a game that I always think of as a mindful game because you have beautiful soundtrack, you have a beautiful world, and you have all these sound effects, and you can just sort of take stock and wander and just breathe everything in and take a minute yourself. There's so many games out there and so many different genres that can act in different ways for what you're needing. Sometimes like there's nothing better than a cathartic shooter after a stressful day because you have so much adrenaline in you that you're like, if I actually play Doom right now, I can just yell at the screen and just shoot these weird monsters and then you know what? I'll be at peace. I'll be good. And yeah, I think they're so intrinsically linked in so many different ways that there's something for everyone.
I always say, first of all, I linked your article in the chat. Everybody read it. I always say, you know how there's all those studies that are out on like how walking through nature can impact your mental health and your mood. There's like so many studies about that. I want somebody to study whether a game like walking around in like a pixel forest can have a similar impact, because I really believe that it probably does. I have to believe, like walking through Genshin
Absolutely.
Impact, like walking through the rainforest of Sumeru in Genshin Impact, like I feel very similar to how I do when I'm on a hike. And I would love somebody to actually research that. Please, somebody research that.
I would not be surprised in the slightest if it lined up 1-to-1.
Right?
Great.
Same.
I guess the one thing, I feel like Alex covered so much, which is like so true. But at least the things that I can speak of my experience, and I kind of mentioned a little bit when talking about Greece, is that there's so many games nowadays, fortunately, and especially indie games on grief. I know we mentioned but we mentioned like so many games already. The Spiritfarer, Greece, again, Wildflowers, and it's unfortunately a topic that we all experience at some point of our lives. Like, I mean, and again, I guess talking about what we said, content warning. I will be talking about grief, and this may be triggering for some people. But again, it's unfortunately in the way I see the world, something that it's so like we've all experienced, or we will all experience it one way or another, because as much as we all exist, then very naturally at some point we won't exist. Like that's one of the few things that we know for a fact of the world. Like there's so much uncertainty out there, but those are one of the few things that we know that are going to happen. And yet it's something that it's so difficult to talk about and so difficult to express yourself and your grief, like, which I mean, in some ways I understand, right? It is a very personal experience, but regardless of that, there is an experience that many people can relate to and can connect to. So I've been really happy to see that we're seeing more games, particularly indie games, that touch on grief. In some cases, make it the theme of the game. And I do actually want to do a quick shout out to someone from Cosmic Hearts, Strawberry Shortcake,
Oh yeah.
who she does Mortal Mondays, where she's one of the first people that I learned that use the term death positive, which if you've never heard that word before, it might come up with like, wait, what do you mean by that? But no, it's so much about like we should be much more open about death and grief, and understand the process, understand things that you can do to better like understand your grief, better know like how to prepare for yourself to experience grief in the future, or if you're experiencing it right now. And it's so great that there are so many indie games that put that as the theme of the game.
Yeah. I agree. I also I mentioned, like I've been playing Wildflowers. And the reason that I did that is I knew it was about grief, and I've been grieving, and I will be for some time. And I was not at a place where I could socialize at the time. I didn't have the words to talk to my friends. I didn't want to talk. I wanted to lay in bed, and I needed something to do. And I remembered that I had this game, and I remembered that it was about grief. And that's what I wanted to sit in. I wanted to sit in it. I wanted that. I needed that. And I reached for that game, and I was so glad that it existed, because I could sit there and not wallow, but I could be, in my grief alone. And it wasn't like I had to talk to a friend. I could just experience a story about grieving and loss. And I felt so incredibly comforted by that. And I really don't even know if I could put to words how comforting that was. And I played Spiritfarer when I was not grieving, and it was impactful, but I can't imagine what it would be like to play it now. And maybe I'll replay it. I don't know. But I think it's so great that stories like that are told for when it's the moment that you need them, So I think that's a really great point, Fierce. Thank you for bringing it up. And thank you for sharing Strawberry Shortcake.
No, yes. She's also part of Cosmic Hearts, the group that
Yeah.
Lilith and I are part of. So that's why we know both her. We both know her.
Yeah, to speak to your utilizing gaming experiences to process grief, for me especially, anytime there's any sort of loss or grief experience, I tend to shut down and go numb and sort of bottle those things up. And having an outlet like that, something to kind of walk you through processing your emotions, is so powerful and liberating because you won't you won't be able to heal and grow through something unless you address it and confront it, and that is very difficult to do. But having that game there, having somebody else's experience guide you through those emotions, is it's almost impossible to describe how beneficial that is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really well said too. I think the other thing mental health related that helps me with games, is games that have a daily component. And it's funny because I can also talk on the flip side how those can be a struggle for me. But when I'm having a really bad mental health episode, having the structure of needing to log onto a game every day and do some tasks can be huge for my brain, because I might not be able to do that with my everyday life. But sometimes like logging on and doing that is a way for me to jump off starting to do some tasks in my actual life, or honestly sometimes just a reason to get up, just a reason to start the day, go from my bed to the PC, and do some daily tasks in a game, and like those are the hardest moments, but those are real moments and a lot of us experience them. And like games that have that sort of need to log on and do a couple of things, can really make a difference, at least for me. I don't know. I see some nodding heads, so I feel like people agree. But
No, I just actually
Absolutely.
want to add to that because, like in the pandemic, like I would just track of time, and then Animal Crossing would really help me know what time it was. Like, oh, Easter
yeah,
is happening soon, like Turkey Day, like all these different, even just like the events that like if it wasn't for Animal Crossing and having that like in-game time be the same as like in real time, it would just have been much harder to navigate the pandemic. So I completely agree with you, Lilith.
yeah. No, I remember New Leaf. I don't know if this was a thing in New Horizons. It might have been added later. But New Leaf, there was like your villagers would ask you to come over at a specific time later that day. And like I was playing it at a time when I was, going through a hard time, and having that to look forward to was big for me. Like I was like, I'm going to visit Bones at 2 o'clock. Nobody make plans with me. Like I'm going to Bones's house at
Yeah.
2 o'clock. Like that, we have a date. Like it was huge. I feel like they might have added that into New Horizons, but maybe not the same. Like I think they might just like randomly pop over or something. It's not the
Yeah.
same. I remember setting a phone alarm. Like I had to play at 2 o'clock because Bones was expecting me.
Oh, so cute.
Oh goodness. You felt bad when you forget. Yeah, same. No.
Oh no.
That's why I used to set the alarm.
Rewind the in-game clock. You gotta
Right?
you gotta make that appointment. Reset. He can yell at me all he wants.
Exactly. All right. So I think we should take a little wellness break, and then when we return, I think it's the time for the last part of our day today, which I can't believe. But like show and tell. So I asked everybody to come up with a game or two. Perhaps we've mentioned it already. It's okay if we have. We've covered a lot.
Probably.
That you would recommend to anyone in chat, or perhaps to just queer youth in general, who might be looking for a new game to play with some queer rep. Bonus points if you have something to show, but it's okay. I know a lot of these games are, on our PCs, so you might not have anything. So we're going to do that when we return. Just a quick little hydration, stretch break, and we'll be back in just a few with some game recommendations for all of you. So BRB. Hello, everybody. We are back. Hope you had a nice little break. I hope you got some water or some tea. Although I feel you, Alex. I am so hot. It is. I don't know. Are Fierce and Yard? Are you in hot environments, or are you more controlled?
It's not bad here in Erie.
Yeah, I think right now it's better than when we started. So
That's good. I am so hot. I'm running out of here after it's over, and I think I'm just gonna go for a walk in the hopefully the breeze. I think it's definitely hotter in the house than it is outside. So we are at our final segment of today's stream, which has been so wonderful. I've really enjoyed talking with all of you. I knew that I would, but it's been even better than I imagined. And this is the part where I have asked everybody to recommend a couple of games. Now, I myself have a list here of 5. I need to narrow it down. So I'm hoping maybe somebody will say some of mine and I can narrow it down a bit. But if you have something physical that you can show, great. If not, it's okay. I only have a physical thing for one game. But yeah, I'd love to see what everybody recommends. This is just the beauty of recommending games to friends, you know, like there is nothing better than that in my opinion. So I don't know, does anybody want to go first?
the silence of like, who will go first? I can go first.
Go
if
for
that's
it,
okay.
Fierce. You got it.
So, I mean, this is my time to talk about Celeste.
Yes.
So, although I see that that Jared also has Celeste shirt, so I'm excited that we have all the Celeste representation here. And yeah, as you can, if you haven't told already, you know I love plushies and I love Fangamer. They have all the plushies of all the games. So if you haven't heard of Fangamer, you're literally a fan of games. Go for it. But what can I say? I mean, I guess I can say so much, but I guess so I'm talking about Celeste, which was released in 2018 by Maddie Thorson and her team, which I think nowadays they're known as Extremely OK Games, which even just the name of it I love. And they've actually made games before and are releasing a new game next year. So I'll also, expect more from them soon. But so Celeste is about a lot of things actually. But the story is about Madeline here, who goes on a journey on a quest on climbing a mountain, Celeste, the Celeste Mountain. That's where the name story comes from. And you can tell that she starts with like a lot of insecurities, like that's something that you kind of experience in the beginning of just like she going through this journey and not knowing if she could overcome this mountain and get to the top. And really early on in her journey she meets Madeline. Well, that's the name that the community has has very honestly, like, appropriately but also not so, and I'll get to that, named kind of like her double ganger, but like like someone who is very much part of Madeline, but shows a lot of things that Madeline has been trying to hide for all her life. So much of her anxieties, her stress, her depression, like so many of these parts of her that she didn't really like. And in the beginning of Celeste, when they first kind of see each other and this Madeline kind of becomes like a person, so much of Madeline is about trying to not come to term with it and avoid it. And so much of like the gameplay, I mean the gameplay on its own is platformer, but point being, like, so much of like the mechanics on its own, you're Madeline trying to avoid like a bunch of replicas of Madeline trying to like get catch up to you, and so much of that. And in the story you also meet other characters like Theo, which Theo I think is just like a great representation of like what a great best friend looks like. That's also one of the things I love about Celeste. Like, if you don't have a friend like Theo, prioritize on finding a friend like Theo. That on its own is very, very special. But what makes this game so powerful to me is that kind of like the way the game ends and like the way the game kind of comes to a resolution is Madeline realizing that this other part of herself, Madeline, is a part of herself, and it's a part that can ultimately help her grow, accept who she is, and climb the Celeste Mountain at the end. And the very last level of kind of like the main story, just before the credits, it's almost like them combining into one character. That even in the mechanics of the game, now you're able to do two dashes rather than one, and that's kind of what lets her reach all the higher points of the Celeste Mountain to get to the very end. And that story is so much of like the story itself, but also of the gameplay. Because so I struggle with anxiety, and very much like Madeline, I didn't realize I had anxiety for a really long time until 6 months ago that I started therapy. And my therapist is like, "Do you have anxiety?" And I'm like, "No, I just get nervous here and there." But no, I had I mean, I have Madeline, and it's someone that I've always tried to like put down, not talk about, like hide it from my life. And now that I'm in therapy and I realize that I also have like my Madeline, my first like my first interaction with it, the same as Madeline. Like I wanted to like, no, like now that I know that you're here, like I don't want to have you anymore. Like now I'm glad that now I can recognize that I have anxiety, because now I could like push it away, be like my best version without this part of me. But no, like the best way to really deal with like anxiety and depression and all of these things is to still realize that it's a very much part of who you are, and it's a part that cares so much about you, so much so that like that's why sometimes you might have this like, it realizes that you're going through something so difficult, and that's why you're feeling in a very difficult place. And for me, that also gets really connected with the gameplay. And that's why I love the game being so challenging, because sometimes it's hard for me in my real life to be patient with myself and be like, this anxiety is here and I just wish I could put it down. But no, it's going to take multiple practices, multiple like, so much of the different skills that I work in therapy to accept my anxiety. And it's going to take trial and error, and Celeste is very much about that. You're going to die. There's some levels that I've had over 1,000 deaths, but for some reason, Celeste, it's much easier for me to like be kinder to myself and be like, no, like even if this is the 1,000 death, maybe the 1,001 death is going to be when I get to the end of that mountain. And that's so much how I feel with how I've been dealing with my anxiety nowadays, that this game just like connects to me in a way that like I've never related so much to a character. And it's something that, unfortunately, anxiety, well, no, that's the whole point. Anxiety and depression is something that so many of us go through, that I think Celeste did such a great job at representing such a deep and emotional aspect that many of us can experience with a story, with the gameplay, with so much of what Celeste is, that I cannot recommend this game. I talked already so much about like the queerness in the game. Again, like the creator, Maddie Thorson, it was about like her experience going through realizing that they're trans. And for me, I connected more with the anxiety aspect, but this whole like climbing a mountain can be related to so many different things, like coming to terms with your queerness, coming to terms with like going through depression and so many other mental health related aspects that you might be facing, that Celeste can be so relatable for, I think, for so many of us. And again, if for some reason platformer is not your thing, it has accessibility mode so that you can kind of really put it to the way I see it's like you still want it to be challenging, because again for me it helps me as a reminder that like it's going to take me a lot of tries, but I can do it. Like in the very beginning, it's so much of like you can do it, just breathe. It also has that mindfulness aspect as well. So you kind of want to like change the difficulty until it's like still challenging, but you can get to the end, right? Like it's kind of, you kind of wanted to have that like in between difficulty level, which at least for me, the way the game is designed, it exactly fitted with my preferences. So for me, it also kind of made it easier to to experience the difficulty in a way that I enjoy it. Um, and if for some reason the game is too easy, then go to the modding community, and they're gonna make sure you don't find it easy. And I'm just a beginner for so many of the mods in the game, which for me that completely blows my mind. If you know, I've even done some of like the harder levels of the vanilla slash base game, but the modding community goes very far with how much precision platforming it can be. But yes, Celeste is a very very special game to me, and a game that I will always recommend.
I feel like you might have finally sold it to me. I think I might try it. We'll see. We'll see. That was a really beautiful summary of that game. And you can tell how much it means to you. Thank you for sharing it with us.
I know, of course. Thank you for creating the space for us to share about these games.
Of course.
So I was intending to talk about Celeste as well, but I don't think there's anything I could add that you haven't said already. And I laughed a couple times during your explanation because I have been recently going through a very similar journey of understanding and distancing from and attempting to accept my own anxiety and depression. I've recently been going to therapy as well, and for a long time it was like I knew there were certain feelings that I had, but compared to, which of course you're not supposed to do, but compared to the struggles that I had seen other people going through and the traumas that I know are worse than what I carry, I had always kind of discounted my own feelings and thought that they weren't really there. But after going to therapy and being told, no, yes, that is you are anxious, you are depressed, I was like, oh, great. And it's like both good, bad, I don't know. And yeah, trying to distance from that and trying to be like, well, I don't want to be that anymore. And then the journey to self-acceptance and understanding that that is a part of me, and the anxiety comes from a place of wanting me to be okay. It's not a negative. It can be in excess, but I think after hearing you describe it, I really need to play Celeste again.
So every time I talk about it, I'm like, and I almost never play enough.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to play it again soon. The other game I would like to mention again, I did mention it before. I'm a very big music person. Music helps me to process emotions a lot. And I am the kind of person who will listen to a song over and over and over and over again. And I mentioned Sayonara Wild Hearts. I absolutely loved the game and the journey of heartbreak and growth and just finding yourself once again after that heartbreak. And I do have like a little vinyl here.
Oh my goodness.
The game is very aesthetically gorgeous, and I cannot recommend it enough. If it takes maybe an hour or two to play through it, you're basically just playing through an album, and the journey it tells is very interesting. I don't want to get too deep into explaining the plot because I feel like it's, I don't know, best experienced on your own. I don't know. I'm weird about spoiling things, especially when they're like very personal journeys, but yeah.
I just added it to my long list. I think the final sold it for me. It's so beautiful, the colors.
It is a gorgeous game. Highly recommend it. And
is the art of the game similar to the color scheme of that vinyl, or?
Yes.
Oh my god, then
yeah, the entire game is very yes. Yeah. And then one more game I will briefly mention, once again, Princess Farmer. Just if you're looking for a game that is unashamed of who it is, It is a really cute, funny story visual novel, and I don't know. I love it. I love them. I love the game.
You have me so excited to play that this week. I'm like, all right, I need to bump that up during the week. Maybe it'll be Tuesday.
If I can chill a bit as well, it is the most unique match 3 I have played ever.
Love that.
Oh, the mechanic, just mechanically, it's weird.
I'm very excited.
Um,
Thank you for that, child.
I'm adding so many of these to my list, and maybe I will finish Celeste eventually.
It's
I've been
tough.
playing it for like 3 years. I've still not finished it. So the first game I want to talk about is one I have got something for, which is just here, which is my Tornek, because I want to mention Horizon Zero Dawn, which is, I was umming and ahhing about whether to talk about it, because there are DLCs, and recently in the latest DLC, Burning Shores, queerness has been a confirmed trait of the protagonist, Aloy, but the base game does not have any outward romance options in the entire game. Like that, it's not a thing you can do. It's not an option essentially. And so I was like, is it a queer game or is it not? But I think I was drawn to it because it felt innately queer. There was so that's the Guerrilla Games action adventure game where you play as Aloy, who's been outcast from the main village in the world that has been taken over by mechanical animals. This is a giraffe, anyone who doesn't know. And it's about her trying to understand who she is and how she fits into this world, as she seems to play a larger part in the entire existence of these creatures and how they came to be. And that story of self-discovery really resonated with me and feels very queer. And something I really love about her character is the way she is led by her empathy and her compassion and her curiosity. She goes to every situation, every different group of people with this like open-mindedness and desire to see the best in them, which again, I think in a world where you have been shunned and in a world where people are always going at you saying your existence is wrong, as is with her, the fact that she can just go, I don't care about that anymore, I'm going to approach this with kindness, is I think, again, a very queer experience and something that I really kind of connected to. Because just because you've maybe had some bad experiences doesn't mean that you should just continue going around being like, I'm putting others. Instead, it's the opposite of going, I know what that feels like and I'm not going to do it to the others because it's cruel, it's unkind, it's unnecessary. And yeah, I think that Aloy is a phenomenal character, incredibly written. I love the entire world of it. I think it's a game I recently played it, I replayed it with the mindful idea of just, you can get these like mechanical, essentially they're horses, and you can just like wander around. And it's just really pretty. I was like being like, I'll see if I can find collectibles, I guess, but I'm basically just going to ride my horse around and see what I can find because it's enjoyable and it's very calming. And again, the fact that romance not being an option was nice because it didn't feel right for her. And I think I haven't played Burning Shores yet, but what I hope and what I've heard has been like, it felt right at the time for the character, which I think is so important. It didn't seem like a retcon. It didn't seem like they went, oh, what if we make her a queer character now so we can like potentially reach a different audience. It just felt like from the start they had that in mind and they were like, when is it right for her? When is she going to have that acceptance? And I think she finally has. And that's why me and my Tormek love this game very, very much. Put him down. He's now looking at me on my desk. The second game I want to mention is a dating sim, Arcade Spirits. Has anyone played that?
No.
I haven't played it, but I do know about it.
I love this game. So this is a Fiction Factory game, and I don't actually play many dating sims. I think this is the only dating sim I've actually ever played. But I got it in a itch.io bundle, and I kind of was just like in the mood to try it out. And I remember playing it alone in my bedroom, and it was the first time I created a character and went, you know what, I'm going to put in they them pronouns. I'm not using them at the time. I've not asked anyone to use them for me, but I'm alone in my bedroom, and this is a character that no one's going to see, no one cares about. It's just me. This is my character. I'm going to do that. And the fact that that was an option was just like really nice. And for those who don't know, the game is about, it's set in a world where the arcade crash never happened. So arcades are still hugely popular around the world, and you get to work in one. There's some other shenanigans going on that I don't want to spoil, but yeah, you get to start working at this arcade, and you meet a whole cast of queer characters who are all so interesting and so lovely, and all of them are so confident in their queerness and in themselves, and I'm there like on my laptop being like, I'm a little they them creature, no one needs to know that. And then being faced with these people who are like I am an openly gay man and I love my life, and like I also use they them pronouns, and like I'm not ashamed of that. And I was like, you know what, this is really nice. They may be pixels on my screen, but they know who they are, and they are so openly who they are, and I love that. And it just felt so comforting that I will yell about this game whenever I can, because I just think it's so sweet and just so colorful and joyous and just a very freeing experience.
I need to play it. I need to play it now.
It's just so good.
I feel like you hit on the two different, like they're two very different kinds of representation, but I think that both are needed and both are amazing. Like I love a game like Horizon. Like I fully agree. Like always been a queer character, and I knew it from the moment that I met her. I did not need confirmation. Confirmation is nice to have, especially when I say like how meaningful it is to see like the team behind the game being like, yes, that is a queer character and always will be. Like I think that can be so moving as a queer gamer to like see that happening and to see the discussions, and like that kind of like overt representation is important. But sometimes that like more subtle, like just existing as a queer person, clearly written by a queer person, like, you know what I'm saying? Like when you see a game or a character in a game and you're like, a queer person touched that, like that was made by a queer person, like that means something too. And I think that those two different kinds are both great and amazing. So
And actually, yeah, I realized that while talking about this, I forgot to mention the other game. I was like, I want to make sure I
go for it.
So, because I think this is a game that very much is both. It's both about like the characters being very queer, but it's in the process when they're kind of learning that of themselves. So it's not, I mean, it's kind of like, in your face, but they're kind of experiencing that, which I think this game is very good, particularly for queer youth. The name of this game is No Longer Home.
Yes. Just
Oh,
yes.
perfect. I have some details here. So it was released in 2021, so it's a relatively recent game. It's a very short game, and it's a semi-autobiography, which I think just on that, I think says a lot, which is about two college students characters, Bo and Al, that are about to end grad school, and they're facing with undergrad, like their usual 3/4 year program, and it's about their life, about them existing, and about them, so Ao is Japanese, and they both use they them pronouns, same as as the creators of the game, which again, that's kind of the connectivity with that biographical experience. But it's about them coming to terms with their identity, all the college student struggles of like needing to figure out what they have to do next and being angry about that society kind of pushes you to that. About again, AO being an international student and needing to worry about like, oh, now that my visa is going to be like away, I'm going to be away from like my partner Bo. And it's so much of like an experience that you go, even if you're not in college, like just in at that age, right, of kind of understanding some of the toxicity that maybe you had with your parents. And so much of the gameplay is just you being on in their flat, like where they live, and just having conversations with each other. And it's like it's such a genuine, just like their lives, but it's the lives that so many of us people from the LGBT community go through, whether it's again, and especially like in youth, queer youth, that it's so much about all of the stuff that comes in college and needing to figure out stuff about yourself, about what you're gonna do when you're barely learning who you are. And I think it's just such a great, like, kind of like experience of what it is to be at that age, that I think like I only played it relatively recently. And I think even that game kind of was one of the games that helped me realize, oh, like these questions that both Bo and Ao talk about them being non-binary, it's like I relate to that. Maybe I'm also non-binary. That was like the first time that I kind of thought of that. But it's I think like for queer youth, they can very much relate to this even more so, especially if they're in college or in school and all of the struggles that they go through. So I think of the games that are particularly for queer youth, No Longer Home is definitely high in my list. And I don't have anything to show of the game, but I have this pin from actually Whitethorn Games that it's like a little heart with the non-binary flag that says gaming is for everyone.
Love
Which I'm like,
that.
hey, this is very on point with this game's themes. Oh, you can't really see it, but it's pretty adorable. You
I
could
love
probably
it.
Weathorngames.com/shop.
Speaking of Whitethorn, I have Providence Oaks.
Hey.
Which I was
I know
going
that
to
game.
wear, but it's so freaking hot. This is from the game I mentioned earlier, Lake, which is an incredible experience and one that I played a bit on this channel. But I started the game on my own channel. And when I started the game, I just thought it was a cozy game about delivering mail in Portland. And that was all as a lesbian I needed to know. And so I was just like interested in the game. And then the second a character comes on, I'm like, okay, this person gives me sapphic vibes. But I do that with everybody. So I was like, it's probably just me making it up. Like it's because they're wearing like a male uniform, whatever. Essentially, Meredith, the main character, leaves her like pretty not so great job in a big city to stay for 2 weeks at her parents' house while they're on vacation and take over her dad's mail route. And while she's doing that, you're driving the truck. It's very Grand Theft Auto, but you're not allowed to run anyone over. I tried. I thought it would be a fun addition to the game, but you can't. It stops you. You drive around this really beautiful scenic lake town and deliver mail and get to know the community while you do that. And you get to, I didn't even know this when I first started playing, but you get to romance a couple of the people there if you would like to. And when I first met the character Angie, I was like, oh my God, is she flirting with me? Definitely just flirted with me, right, chat? That was what, right? Can I date her? We were so shocked that we could date her, and we had the cutest little dates. And it was amazing, and I absolutely loved it. So that game is like high on my list always, in part just because the experience of not anticipating the representation that we got and it being such a lovely surprise. and also just because it's a wonderful story that you should definitely play. It's fantastic. And then I would echo a lot of the recommendations that people left, but I'm going to add a quick couple other ones here just because we're out of time, and but I do want to mention them. This game is in early access, but worth playing now, but also will be one to watch when it comes out. Coral Island. If you like farm sims, hot people, dating anybody that is hot, the Coral Island.
I hate hot people.
They're the worst.
Coral Island has really wonderful representation. The team developing it is pretty amazing. The game itself is like a really innovative take on farm sims, in my opinion. They have like a cool like diving component. And there are so many people in it that you can date, like if you're queer, and I don't even know if I'll be able to choose. So definitely recommend Coral Island. I would recommend Calico as well, another Whitethorn pick.
Feeling the love today.
You own a cat cafe. There are lesbians. It's amazing. This one is not overtly queer, but I felt like it healed my queer inner child. And there are a couple, there's at least one trans character in it. It's hard to notice, but it's there. Alba Wildlife Adventure. This is one of those games where I would just be like, I would say that that's a queer game. I don't know if other people would agree with me, but I felt like it definitely did a bit to heal my queer inner child. I really resonated with like Alba's self-expression and just the themes of the game. And if you're looking for a charming game about like photographing and protecting wildlife and mobilizing a community, there's some really great themes there that I think are very, very queer. And shout out to the game that I'm obsessed with right now, Roots of Pasha. There are some really hot lesbians in that as well, unexpected, but another farm sim. And you can have some queer relationships as well, but unfortunately, you can't have a throuple. Wait, that was a large noise. You can't have a throuple with the lesbians. I've tried, so yeah. Those are some that I would recommend. But with that, we have made it to the end of our panel, which I can't believe. I had an absolute blast hanging out with all three of you. I hope you enjoyed your time here as well. And thank you everybody in chat for hanging out and sharing the love of games and gaming communities. I would love it if folks, panelists would like to shout out again where people can find you if you want to be found. If you want to be found, no pressure if you don't want to be found, but if you want to
do not perceive me.
And this could be your work channels as well, if that's what you'd like to share, whatever you're comfy with. We can start with you first.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I stream on Twitch Mondays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then you can find me with my username, Fierce Axolotl. That's why it's the Axolotl theme.
Continuing the aquatic trend, I am Manta Ray online anywhere on almost every single platform except Xbox. Long story. I'm not going to get into it. But yeah, my name's Yared, and please go check out Whitethorn. They are an awesome company, and I'm super happy to work for. And on brand with today's theme, check out the Humble Bundle that supports the Trevor Project. It is $12 for 12 really good games.
It's pinned at the top of chat. Click it.
Also join the Discord if you want to talk about games. And I will stop talking there.
You can find me on Twitter. It's just my name, Alex_Dewing, D-W-I-N-G. Annoyingly, all of my games have different handles, so I'm probably going to forget some. But if you like melancholy gardening sim type things, then check out also the very cool art with like pumpkins and this. You can find The Garden Path on all socials under the handle from Carrot Cake. Super cute game. Love working with them. Obviously, that would be weird if I didn't. If you like the Moomins, then check out Snufkin Melody Moomin Valley. I think the Twitter is Hyper Games Studio, maybe. I can't remember. What else? If you like RPGs that are like Pokemon but more musically veered, then check out Cassette Beast that launched 2 weeks ago and will be coming on console in like 2 weeks. That is Bitchin Studio, BYTTEN Studios. And I think at that point I'm going to stop because that's a lot of information. Yes.
Incredible.
There should be like one single place where I could just be like, go here to find everything. But alas,
That would be too easy.
make my life. It's true.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. I'm Lilith. You can find me at Lilith Fox here on Twitch. I'm also trying to make the TikTok thing happen. I cover games there. So Lilith.Fox there, because apparently there's another Lilith Fox in the world. Who knew? I
do
have
the same
a feeling
thing. I'm Fears.Axolotl on TikTok. Like,
I
of
have
all
a feeling
platforms.
it's me and I made an account and forgot. I really do. I really have a strong suspicion that that's what happened, but it's okay.
That's basically the story of why I don't have my name on Xbox.
Stop, that's so funny. So yeah, you can find me there. This has been a delight. Thank you, chat. Thank you, panelists. And big shout out to It Gets Better Project. If you're not already following this space, please follow it. Please watch it. Incredible content here all the time and lots more to come. So thank you, It Gets Better, and thank you, chat. We're gonna head off now. Enjoy your Sunday, everybody, and take care of yourselves. And I'll see you around town.